Charlotte Hayes thought the worst thing about working the closing shift was cleaning the espresso machine. She was wrong. Tonight, 3 men with dead eyes and hollow voices would throw her into the back of a van, tie her wrists with zip ties that cut deep enough to draw blood, and tell her she had 48 hours to produce money she'd never seen. Or they'd sell her to someone who'd make sure no one ever found the body. Her father's debts, they said. The professor who taught Victorian poetry and drank chamomile tea. The man who couldn't hurt a fly. Except he could. He did. And now Charlotte would pay the price. If you're hooked, stay with me until the end. Like this video and comment your city so I can see how far Charlotte's story travels. The October wind off Boston Harbor cut through Charlotte's coat like it had a personal grudge. She locked the cafe door at 11:47 p.m., 3 minutes ahead of schedule, and allowed herself exactly 1 moment of satisfaction. The tip jar had been decent tonight, enough for groceries and maybe, if she stretched it, the electric bill that was already 6 days overdue. The street was empty. Not unusual for a Tuesday in this part of Southie, where the tourists didn't venture and the locals knew better than to linger after dark. Charlotte pulled her phone from her pocket, thumb hovering over her messages. 3 unread texts from Becca, her roommate, probably asking if she'd remembered to pick up milk. 1 from her academic advisor reminding her that her thesis proposal was due Friday. She hadn't written a single word. The thesis was supposed to be about her father, Dr. Robert Hayes, who'd spent 30 years teaching romantic literature at Boston College before a heart attack took him 4 months ago. Charlotte had pitched it as an exploration of how educators shaped cultural literacy in working-class communities. Really, it was just an excuse to keep him alive a little longer, to pretend his death hadn't left a hole the size of the goddamn Grand Canyon in the middle of her chest. She started walking toward the T station, boots clicking against wet pavement. 2 blocks. That's all she needed to cover. 2 blocks and she'd be underground, surrounded by other night shift workers and insomniacs, safe in the fluorescent anonymity of public transportation. She made it 1.5. The van came from nowhere, or maybe it had been waiting, engine idling in the shadows between streetlights, and she'd been too buried in her own head to notice. It jumped the curb with a screech of tires that sent her heart into her throat. She stumbled backward, phone clattering to the ground. 3 men. They moved with the kind of synchronized efficiency that told her this wasn't their first time, that they'd done this before, that she was just another name on a list. The first one caught her arm before she could scream. The second clamped a hand over her mouth, fingers digging into her jaw hard enough to bruise. The third grabbed her legs when she tried to kick. "Don't!" The word came from the first man, whispered directly into her ear. His breath smelled like coffee and something medicinal. "Don't fight, don't scream. You do either, and this gets worse." Charlotte's training, years of self-defense classes her father had insisted on, pepper spray she'd carried religiously since freshman year, evaporated like steam. Her body went rigid, brain stuttering through half-formed thoughts that didn't connect to action. She managed 1 muffled sound against the hand covering her mouth before they hauled her into the van's open side door. The interior smelled like motor oil and old carpet. They zip-tied her wrists behind her back, the plastic cutting into skin immediately. Someone threw a canvas bag over her head, rough fabric that scratched her face and filled her nose with the scent of mildew. The van lurched forward, tires squealing, and Charlotte's stomach dropped as they took a corner too fast. "Please." Her voice came out strangled, barely audible through the bag. "Please, I don't have any money. I'm just a student. I work at a coffee shop. I don't—" "Shut up." The command came from someone in the front seat. Male. Boston accent, but not the thick Southie drawl she was used to. Something more refined, like he'd worked to sand down the edges. Charlotte shut up. Time became elastic, impossible to measure. The van made several turns. Left, right again. A long straightaway that might have been a highway. She tried to count seconds, to create some kind of mental map, but panic kept fracturing her concentration. Her wrists throbbed. The bag made every breath feel insufficient, like drowning in slow motion. When the van finally stopped, hands grabbed her again. They pulled her out, stumbling, onto what felt like gravel. The air was different here, colder, laced with salt and something industrial. Water nearby. A harbor maybe, or the docks. They walked her forward, 1 man on each arm. She heard a door creak open, then they were inside, footsteps echoing in a space that sounded cavernous. A warehouse. Had to be. The acoustics were all wrong for anything else. Someone pushed her down into a chair, metal, cold even through her jeans. They didn't remove the bag. Charlotte Hayes. The voice came from in front of her, maybe 10 feet away, different from the men who'd grabbed her. Older, authority in every syllable. Yes. Her throat was so dry the word barely came out. That's... yes. Daughter of Robert Hayes, late of Boston College. Previously of several other institutions, though his employment history gets a bit murky the further back you go. Charlotte's chest tightened. My father was a professor. He taught literature. He owed us a considerable amount of money. The words hung in the air like a physical presence crushing the oxygen out of the space between them. That's not possible. Charlotte's voice shook despite her best efforts to steady it. My father didn't... He lived in a rent-controlled apartment and drove a 15-year-old Camry. He didn't have money to owe anyone. Footsteps approached. Someone pulled the bag off her head. The warehouse was exactly what she'd pictured. Corrugated metal walls, concrete floor stained with things she didn't want to identify, industrial lights hanging from chains that cast harsh shadows. 3 men stood in a loose semicircle around her. The one who'd spoken was in his 50s, gray hair cut military short, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Charlotte's entire wardrobe. Your father, he said, voice perfectly calm, borrowed $350,000 from our organization. He had 5 years to repay it. He managed 4 years and 3 months before his unfortunate cardiac episode. Charlotte stared at him. The number was so absurd, so completely disconnected from any reality she understood, that for a moment she couldn't process it as language. That's insane. The words came out flat. You're insane. My father was a literature professor. He made $48,000 a year. He couldn't borrow that kind of money if he tried. No one would... She stopped, brain catching up. You're not a bank. No. The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. We're not. Then what could he possibly need that much money for? That's not your concern. Your concern is the outstanding balance. $173,000, plus interest accrued since his death. Call it an even $200,000. Charlotte's laugh came out broken, edged with hysteria. I don't have $200,000. I don't have $2,000. I have $1,700 in my checking account and a maxed-out credit card. I'm a graduate student working part-time at a cafe. I can't... This is insane. You can't expect... We expect, the man interrupted, that you'll find a way. You have 48 hours. 48. Charlotte shook her head, trying to clear it. Nothing made sense. The world had tilted sideways and she couldn't find her footing. I can't. I don't know how to... Where would I even... That's your problem. He nodded to one of the other men who stepped forward and produced a phone. You're going to make some calls. Friends, family, anyone who might be persuaded to help. If you're convincing enough, you'll walk out of here in 2 days. If not, he shrugged. There are buyers for young women with your particular profile. We'll recoup our losses one way or another. The casual way he said it, like discussing a business transaction, like she was inventory to be liquidated, sent ice through Charlotte's veins. I don't have family. Her voice came from somewhere distant, disconnected from her body. My father was an only child. My mother died when I was 6. There's no one. Then I suggest you get creative with your friendships. They gave her the phone. Her phone, she realized, the one that had clattered to the pavement during the abduction. The screen was cracked, but functional. They'd unlocked it somehow, bypassed her security. Everything was there. Her contacts, her messages, her entire digital life laid bare. Start with the roommate, the man suggested. Becca, isn't it? She comes from money. Connecticut family. Father's a surgeon. Charlotte's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. They'd researched her. Not just grabbed a random girl off the street. They'd planned this, mapped out her life, identified leverage points. She doesn't have access to that kind of money, Charlotte whispered. Her parents cut her off when she dropped out of law school. Then you'll need to be persuasive. Tell her what happens if you don't pay. Use your imagination. Make her understand the stakes. He turned and walked toward a door at the far end of the warehouse. The other men followed, leaving Charlotte alone in the chair with her zip-tied wrists and her cracked phone and the weight of an impossible debt crushing down on her shoulders. The first call went to voicemail. Becca's cheerful greeting, "Hey, you've reached Becca. Leave a message, and I'll probably forget to call you back," felt obscene in the context of the warehouse, the zip ties, the man in the expensive suit who'd just threatened to sell her like livestock. Charlotte's voice cracked when she tried to speak. "Becca, it's me. I'm in trouble, serious trouble. Call me back as soon as you get this. Please." She ended the call and immediately tried again. This time Becca picked it up on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. "Charlotte? It's almost 1 a.m. Are you okay?" "No." The word came out too loud, echoing in the warehouse. Charlotte forced herself to breathe, to modulate her tone. "No, I'm not okay. I need your help." "What happened? Where are you?" "I don't know where I am. Someone took me after work. They grabbed me off the street and brought me here, and they're saying my father owed them money. A lot of money. They want me to pay it back or—" Her voice broke. "Or they're going to sell me." Silence on the other end. Then, "Charlotte, what the fuck are you talking about? I know how it sounds. I know it's insane, but I'm sitting in a warehouse with my hands zip-tied, and they have guns, and they're serious, Becca. They know about you. They know your parents are doctors. They think—" "My parents cut me off," Becca interrupted, voice rising. "You know that. I don't have access to their money anymore." "I know. I told them that. But maybe— Could you call them? Could you ask? Tell them it's an emergency. Tell them I'll pay them back. I'll work for the rest of my life if I have to." "How much are we talking about?" Charlotte closed her eyes. $200,000. The silence stretched so long Charlotte thought the call had dropped. Then Becca laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "You're joking." "I'm not. Charlotte, my parents wouldn't give me $200 right now, let alone $200,000. We haven't spoken in 8 months. They made it very clear that I'm on my own until I stop wasting my potential and go back to school. Please." Charlotte hated the desperation in her voice, hated begging, but pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Please just try. Call them. Tell them what's happening. Maybe if they know someone's life is—" "Is this real?" Becca's voice had gone quiet. "Charlotte, is this actually happening, or are you having some kind of breakdown? Because your dad died 4 months ago, and you haven't really dealt with it. And maybe—" "I'm not having a breakdown!" The shout tore out of Charlotte's throat before she could stop it. One of the men, the one who'd told her to shut up in the van, appeared in the doorway across the warehouse. He didn't say anything, just stood there watching. Charlotte lowered her voice. "I'm not having a breakdown. I'm zip-tied to a chair in a warehouse, and there are men with guns, and I need help. Please." Becca exhaled slowly. Okay, I'll call my parents. I'll try. But Charlotte, I can't promise anything. You need to understand that." "I understand, thank you. Thank you, just try." The call ended. Charlotte stared at the phone screen at the dozens of other contacts that represented the sum total of her social network. Grad school friends, undergrad acquaintances, the guy from her feminist theory seminar who'd asked her out twice, the barista trainer from work who always covered her shifts when she asked. None of them had $200,000. She tried anyway. Called Professor Martinez, who'd been her father's colleague and had spoken at his memorial service. Got voicemail. Left a message that probably sounded unhinged. Called Ethan, who she'd dated briefly sophomore year and who'd inherited a trust fund at 21. He listened to her entire explanation before saying, very gently, "Charlotte, I spent the trust fund. I told you that. The trip to Thailand, that wasn't cheap. And I'm broke now. I'm living with my parents. I can maybe loan you $500, but that's—" She thanked him and hung up before he could finish. Called Sarah from her cohort, who listened in silence and then said, "Is this about your thesis? Because I know you're stressed about the deadline, but you can get an extension. You don't need to—" Charlotte ended that call without responding. The hours bled together. The men brought her water, but no food. Let her use a chemical toilet in the corner of the warehouse that made her want to vomit. Removed the zip ties long enough for her to make more calls, then secured her wrists again when it became clear she wasn't going anywhere. She worked through her entire contact list, called people she hadn't spoken to in years, reached out to acquaintances who barely knew her name. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Initial confusion, growing horror as she explained, then the inevitable admission that they couldn't help. That kind of money didn't exist in her world. It was a fantasy figure, something for movies about corporate mergers and Silicon Valley buyouts. By hour 6, her voice was raw. By hour 12, she'd stopped crying. By hour 18, she'd moved past fear into a kind of numb acceptance that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground was about to give way. The man in the expensive suit, she'd started thinking of him as the boss, capital letters, because he never offered a name, returned at hour 23. "Progress?" he asked. "No." Charlotte's voice came out flat, emotionless. "No one has that kind of money. No one I know has that kind of money. I told you that." "Then you're not trying hard enough." "I'm trying." The shout echoed in the empty warehouse, surprising her with its vehemence. "I've called everyone I know. I've begged. I've explained the situation. They can't help. People in my life don't have this kind of money." We're graduate students and baristas and adjunct professors living paycheck to paycheck. You picked the wrong person. My father picked the wrong person. Or you picked the wrong daughter. Or someone made a mistake. But I can't pay you back because the money doesn't exist in my world. The boss studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "Your father said something similar toward the end, that he'd made a mistake, that he'd gotten in over his head." He pulled a chair from somewhere, sat down facing her. "Would you like to know what he borrowed the money for?" Charlotte didn't respond, didn't trust her voice. "Information," the boss continued. "Your father wasn't just a literature professor, Charlotte. He was an intelligence asset, worked for people who needed eyes and ears in places they couldn't reach. Academic conferences, faculty meetings, international symposiums. He was very good at it, careful, discreet, built a network over decades. And then, about 5 years ago, he needed capital. Significant capital. To buy information from someone who could have been very useful to us." "You're lying." The words came automatically, defensive. "My father taught Victorian poetry. He published articles about Tennyson and Browning. He did both," the boss said simply. "Taught his classes, published his papers, lived his quiet academic life, and fed us information worth 10 times what we paid him. Until the heart attack. Very inconvenient timing, really. He'd just acquired something particularly valuable, never got the chance to deliver it." Charlotte's mind reeled. Every memory of her father, his tweed jackets, his reading glasses, the way he'd hum while grading papers, suddenly felt suspect, like maybe she'd never known him at all. "What information?" The boss smiled. "That's classified. But I will tell you this. Several parties would very much like to get their hands on whatever your father acquired, and they assume you have it." "I don't. I don't have anything. He died, and I cleaned out his apartment, and it was just books. So many books, lecture notes, old exams, nothing valuable, nothing worth—" "Maybe you didn't recognize it." The boss stood, straightening his suit jacket. "Maybe it's hidden somewhere you haven't looked. Or maybe your father was cleverer than we gave him credit for, and took his secrets to the grave. Either way, you have 24 hours left. I suggest you think very carefully about where he might have stashed something worth $200,000. He left again. Charlotte sat in the metal chair, wrists aching, mind cycling through the logistics of her father's life. His apartment had been small, 1 bedroom in Cambridge, rent-controlled, the same place he'd lived since Charlotte was a child. She'd spent 3 weeks sorting through his possessions after the funeral, donated his clothes to Goodwill, kept some books, a few photographs, his watch, threw away decades of accumulated paper, syllabi, conference programs, student evaluations. Had there been something hidden in all that paper? Some message she'd missed? Some code embedded in his lecture notes? Or was the boss lying? Trying to squeeze information out of her that didn't exist, playing mind games to see if she'd produce something valuable to save her own skin. Charlotte closed her eyes and tried to think like her father. Robert Hayes, who'd taught her to read before kindergarten, who'd taken her to bookstores every Saturday and let her pick whatever she wanted, who'd cried during her high school graduation and told her she was braver than he'd ever been, who'd apparently lived an entire secret life she'd known nothing about. If he'd hidden something, where would it be? Not the apartment, too obvious, too easily searched after his death, not his office. The university had cleaned that out, redistributed his books to other faculty members. Where else did he go? What spaces had been his alone? The coffee shop. The thought surfaced like a bubble rising through murky water. Her father had spent hours at that cafe, the same one where Charlotte now worked. He'd sit in the corner booth, papers spread across the table, reading and making notes while nursing a single cup of black coffee for an entire afternoon. The staff had known him by name, had given him his usual order without asking. Charlotte's eyes snapped open. "I need to make another call," she said to the empty warehouse. Her voice echoed back at her, unanswered. She waited. 20 minutes later, one of the men appeared. Not the boss. One of the others, younger, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "I need my phone," Charlotte said. "I thought of someone else to call." He retrieved it, unlocked it, handed it over. Stood watching while she navigated to her contacts. She didn't call anyone. Instead, she opened her photos, scrolled back months, past selfies with Becca, past campus shots and sunset pictures, all the way to April, to the week after her father's funeral when she'd been trying to catalog his life through pictures of his spaces, his apartment, his office, the cafe. She'd taken a photo of his corner booth, empty and somehow sad-looking in the afternoon light. In the background, barely visible, the bulletin board where staff and customers posted flyers, job postings, apartment rentals, yoga class advertisements, and postcards. Her father had always pinned postcards to that board, places he'd traveled, images that caught his eye. Charlotte had never paid attention to them. They were just part of the cafe's aesthetic, meaningless decoration. She zoomed in on the photo. The image quality was poor, grainy with digital noise, but she could make out 3 postcards pinned in a rough triangle. One showed the Prague Castle. Another depicted a coffee plantation in Colombia. The third, Charlotte's breath caught. The third postcard showed a bookshop, old European-looking, with gold lettering on the window that she couldn't quite read in the photo. But on the back of the postcard, visible because someone had pinned it at an angle, handwriting. Her father's handwriting. She'd recognize it anywhere. The careful academic script he'd used to annotate her childhood homework. "I need to go to the cafe," she said, voice urgent. "My cafe, where I work. There's something there. Something my father left." The man with the scar stared at her. "Nice try." "I'm not trying anything. Look." She turned the phone so he could see the screen. "That's a photo from the cafe, those postcards on the board. One of them has my father's handwriting on it. If he hid information somewhere, that's where it is. It has to be. He spent hours there every week for years. No one would think to look." "Or," the man said slowly, "you're desperate and making shit up to get out of here. Then come with me." Charlotte's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She was negotiating with her kidnappers, trying to convince them to take her back into the world. But if she was right, if that postcard actually meant something, then maybe she could buy herself time. Maybe she could survive the next 24 hours. "Bring as many people as you want. Keep me in zip ties, I don't care, just let me check, please." The man considered this. Then he pulled out his own phone and made a call. Spoke quietly in a language Charlotte didn't recognize. Russian, maybe, or something Eastern European. Listened. Nodded. "Boss says okay," he finally said. "But if you're bullshitting us, things get worse. Understand?" Charlotte understood. They zip-tied her wrists in front this time, a small mercy, and put the bag back over her head. The van ride felt shorter going back, but that might have been adrenaline warping her perception. When they finally pulled the bag off, Charlotte found herself looking at the familiar facade of the cafe where she worked 5 shifts a week. It was nearly 4 a.m. The street was empty, dark except for scattered streetlights. The cafe wouldn't open for another 5 hours. "Keys," the man with the scar demanded. Charlotte nodded toward her jacket pocket. He retrieved her keychain, selected the cafe key with surprising efficiency. Had they watched her before? Studied her routine? Inside, the cafe looked strange in the pre-dawn darkness. The man flicked on the lights, harsh fluorescence that made Charlotte squint. 2 other men had come with them. The total operation was 4 people now, all focused on her. "Show us," the scarred man said. Charlotte walked to the corner booth on legs that didn't quite feel steady. The bulletin board hung on the adjacent wall, covered in the usual chaos of flyers and business cards, and the postcards were gone. All three of them. The Prague Castle, the Colombian plantation, the bookshop with her father's handwriting. Someone had removed them, leaving 3 small holes where pushpins had been. No. The word came out strangled. No, they were here. I saw them in the photo. They were... You're lying. The scarred man grabbed her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. You wasted our time. You're lying. I'm not. Someone took them down. They were here 4 months ago. Someone must have cleaned the board or... A sound interrupted her. The front door opening. Everyone froze. A woman entered, early 60s, gray hair pulled into a bun, wearing the cafe's staff apron over jeans and a sweater. Margaret, who opened the shop every morning at 5 a.m. to start prep. She saw Charlotte first, then the men. Her eyes went wide. Charlotte, what are you... The scarred man moved faster than Charlotte would have thought possible. He had Margaret against the wall with a hand over her mouth before the older woman could finish her sentence. Please don't hurt her, Charlotte heard herself say, voice high and thin. Please. She doesn't know anything. She just works here. Then she better have some very helpful information. The scarred man looked at Margaret. I'm going to move my hand. You scream, you run, you do anything except answer questions, and this goes bad. Understand? Margaret nodded, eyes streaming tears. He removed his hand slowly. The bulletin board, Charlotte said quickly, before anyone else could speak. Margaret, the postcards that used to be on the bulletin board. Do you remember them? 3 postcards. Prague, Colombia, a bookshop. Margaret stared at her. Charlotte, what is this? Who are these people? Please just answer. The postcards. Do you know what happened to them? Margaret's voice shook. I threw them out last month. They'd been up forever and they were getting ratty, and I was cleaning the board, making room for new... Did you read them? Charlotte interrupted. Before you threw them out. Did you look at what was written on the back? No, I pulled down everything that looked old and tossed it. Charlotte, what's happening? Should I call the police? No police, the scarred man said flatly. Then to Charlotte, where's the trash go? Dumpster out back, Charlotte whispered. But it gets picked up on Tuesdays. That was yesterday. It's gone. The scarred man's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone, made another call, more Russian or whatever the language was. When he hung up, his expression had gone carefully neutral. Boss says bring you back. Now. They zip-tied Margaret to a chair in the storage room. Charlotte tried to apologize, tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled and useless, and dragged Charlotte back to the van. The bag went over her head again. The world reduced to sound and sensation and the crushing weight of her own failure. At the warehouse, the boss was waiting. You wasted 6 hours, he said calmly. You have 18 hours left. The postcards were real, Charlotte said. She was beyond fear now, running on something that felt like fury. My father left something on that board. I know he did. Someone threw it away. That's not my fault. It's not about fault. The boss cut her off. It's about results. You have 18 hours to produce either $200,000 or information worth that much. Anything less, and we proceed to liquidation. I told you. I don't care. His voice didn't rise, didn't shift in tone, but the words landed like physical blows. I don't care about your circumstances or your limitations or your bad luck. I care about my money. Find it or find something worth it. Those are your options. He left. Charlotte sat in the metal chair and tried to think. Her mind kept circling back to the postcards, to her father's careful handwriting on the back of that bookshop image. What had he written? She'd barely glimpsed it in the photograph, just enough to recognize his script. A message? Coordinates? A code? Gone now. Buried in a landfill somewhere, 3 weeks too late to recover. She'd failed. The truth settled over her like a weighted blanket, suffocating and inescapable. She'd failed, her father had failed, and in 18 hours these men would sell her to someone who'd make sure no one ever found the body. Charlotte closed her eyes and tried to pray, but she'd never been religious and the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just sat there, wrists aching, throat raw from too much talking and not enough water, and waited for the end. The explosion came at R43. Charlotte had lost track of time, consciousness drifting in and out as exhaustion and dehydration took their toll. She was vaguely aware of the men moving around the warehouse, speaking in low voices, their tension ratcheting higher as the deadline approached. Then, sound. Not an explosion at first, that came later. First came gunfire, sharp percussive cracks that made Charlotte's entire body jerk against the zip ties. Shouting. More gunfire. Heavy footsteps running. The scarred man appeared in her field of vision, weapon drawn, barking orders in that language she didn't understand. The other men converged, forming a defensive position near the main entrance. The doors blew inward. That was the explosion. Shaped charges, Charlotte would learn later, precisely placed to take out the locks and hinges while leaving the rest of the structure intact. The sound was deafening. The flash of light left purple afterimages burned into her retinas. Men poured through the opening, different men dressed in tactical gear that looked military but wasn't marked with any insignia Charlotte recognized. They moved with lethal efficiency, weapons up, clearing the space with a precision that made her captors look like amateurs. The firefight lasted maybe 30 seconds. When the smoke cleared, literal smoke, acrid and choking, 3 of her captors were on the ground. Not dead, Charlotte realized with dizzy relief, but incapacitated. Taser rounds, maybe, or rubber bullets. The scarred man was zip-tied now, face pressed against the concrete while someone knelt on his back. And the boss? The boss was standing perfectly still, hands raised, while a man in tactical gear held a weapon to his head. The man holding the weapon looked at Charlotte. "Charlotte Hayes?" She managed a nod. "Stay still. We're here to help." Someone came forward with a knife, cut her zip ties. Her hands dropped into her lap, nerveless. She couldn't feel her fingers. "Can you walk?" Charlotte tried. Her legs shook but held. The man, young, maybe 30, with dark hair and careful eyes, steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "We're going to get you out of here. Is there anyone else? Other hostages?" "No." Her voice came out raspy. "Just me. But, Margaret, they tied up a woman at the cafe. Margaret Singh, she opens the shop. Please, someone needs to—" "Already handled." The man guided her toward the blown-out entrance. "Local PD got an anonymous tip. She's fine. Scared, but fine." Outside, 3 black SUVs were parked in a loose perimeter. The sky was beginning to lighten, dawn breaking over Boston Harbor. Charlotte had been in that warehouse for nearly 2 full days. The man helped her into the back seat of the middle vehicle. Another person handed her a bottle of water. Charlotte drank without thinking, nearly choked on it. "Who are you?" she finally managed. "Police?" "Not exactly." The man climbed in beside her, nodded to the driver, who pulled away from the warehouse smoothly. "My name is Marcus. I work for someone who knew your father, who knew you were in trouble." I don't understand." "You will." Marcus pulled out a phone, typed something, then showed her the screen. It displayed a text message, "Package secure, en route." "Who are you texting?" Charlotte asked. "The man who sent us to find you." The SUV drove for 20 minutes, taking a route Charlotte couldn't track. Eventually, they pulled into an underground parking garage, expensive, judging by the pristine concrete and modern lighting. An elevator took them up, and up, and up. When the doors opened, Charlotte found herself in a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston. The furnishings were minimal but clearly expensive. Leather furniture, abstract art, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. A man stood by the windows, looking out at the city. He turned when they entered. Dominic Frost was not what Charlotte had expected, though she hadn't known what to expect. He was maybe 40, tall, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than her yearly tuition. Dark hair, gray eyes, a face that would have been handsome if not for the scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "Wait." Charlotte blinked, looked at Marcus. No scar. Looked back at the man by the windows. The scar was on the wrong side, she realized, but the similarity was striking. Brothers, maybe. "Charlotte Hayes." Dominic Frost's voice was cultured, accent American but hard to place regionally. "I'm sorry we couldn't intervene sooner. The situation required careful handling." Charlotte stared at him. Her brain felt wrapped in cotton, unable to process the rapid sequence of events. Kidnapping, rescue, penthouse apartment. It didn't connect. "Who are you?" she heard herself ask. Someone who owed your father a debt. Dominic moved away from the windows, approaching slowly like she was a spooked animal. Robert Hayes saved my life 3 years ago. He didn't have to. It would have been safer for him not to. But he did it anyway, and I've been looking for an opportunity to repay that favor ever since. By rescuing me? By telling you the truth. Dominic gestured to the leather couch. Sit, please. You've been through trauma. You need rest. But first you need to understand what your father was involved in. What you're involved in now. Charlotte sat, mostly because her legs wouldn't hold her up anymore. Dominic settled into a chair across from her, maintaining careful distance. Your father was exactly what those men told you, he began. An intelligence asset. He worked for several organizations over the years, including mine, gathering information, making connections, facilitating exchanges. He was very good at it. Good enough that when he needed capital for a personal project, I was willing to extend credit. $350,000, Charlotte said numbly. Yes. To purchase information from a source inside a Russian intelligence network. Information about corruption at the highest levels of their organization. Names, account numbers, operational details. Your father acquired it, and then he died before he could deliver it to me or anyone else. So you think I have it? No. Dominic shook his head. I know you don't have it. If you did, those men would have found it when they searched your life for leverage, which means your father either destroyed it before he died or hid it somewhere no one's looked yet. Charlotte rubbed her wrists, which were still raw from the zip ties. The postcards. At the cafe. He wrote something on one of them. I saw it in a photo, but I couldn't read what it said, and now they're gone. We recovered them, Dominic said simply. Charlotte's head snapped up. What? The cafe's dumpster is serviced by a waste management company I have a relationship with. When Marcus told me what you were looking for, I made a call. They pulled last week's bags from the truck before processing. We went through every piece of trash from your cafe, found 3 postcards. One of them has your father's handwriting on the back. He produced a clear plastic sleeve from somewhere. Inside, a postcard showing an old bookshop with gold lettering on the window. He turned it over. Charlotte leaned forward, heart hammering. The back of the postcard showed her father's familiar script, cramped but legible. For Charlie. When you're ready to know what I really did, start where we always started. First editions, second shelf. Dad. Tears blurred Charlotte's vision. She blinked them away, angry at herself for crying. I don't know what that means. I do, Dominic said quietly. Your father used to take you to bookstores. Every Saturday when you were a child. There was one in particular, Blackstone's Rare Books, in Cambridge. He spent hours there with you. Let you pick whatever you wanted from the first edition section. He talked about you constantly. Every conversation, every meeting, he found a way to mention his daughter. How smart you were, how brave, how proud he was that you'd chosen graduate school, that you were following in his academic footsteps, even though it meant years of poverty. Dominic's expression softened. He loved you more than anything in his life, Charlotte, including his work, including his own safety. That's why he hid the information somewhere connected to you, because he knew that if something happened to him, you'd be the only person capable of finding it. Charlotte stared at the postcard, at her father's handwriting, the message he'd left for her, a message that had been pinned to a cafe bulletin board for 4 months, hidden in plain sight, waiting for her to be ready. The bookshop, she said. We should go to the bookshop. We will, Dominic agreed. But not tonight. Tonight you need rest, medical attention, time to process what's happened. Those men are being handled. The organization they work for will be busy dealing with federal investigations and asset seizures for the next 6 months. They won't come after you again. Charlotte wanted to believe him, wanted to feel safe in this expensive apartment with its leather furniture and abstract art. But 4 months of grief and 2 days of terror had taught her that safety was an illusion, that the world her father had moved through was darker and more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. You said my father saved your life, she said. How? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then, I was working an operation in Prague, gathering intelligence on an arms dealer with connections to terrorist organizations. Someone leaked my identity. I was ambushed, badly wounded, left for dead in an alley behind the castle. Your father was in Prague for an academic conference. He found me, got me to a private clinic, stayed with me until my people could extract me safely. He didn't know who I was, didn't ask, just saw someone bleeding out and decided to help." "That sounds like him," Charlotte whispered. "It does." Dominic stood. "Marcus will show you to a guest room. There's a bathroom with everything you need. Sleep. We'll talk more in the morning." Charlotte let Marcus guide her down a hallway to a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a hotel. King-sized bed with crisp white linens, attached bathroom with a shower that had more settings than she could count. She stood under scalding water for 20 minutes, washing away 2 days of captivity and fear. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that probably cost more than her monthly rent, she found clean clothes laid out on the bed. Sweats, t-shirt, everything in her size. They'd planned for this, she realized. Dominic Frost had known exactly what to expect when he sent his people to rescue her. Charlotte dressed and climbed into the enormous bed. The sheets smelled like lavender. The pillows were so soft they felt like clouds. She should have fallen asleep immediately. Instead, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her father, about Robert Hayes, the literature professor, and Robert Hayes, the intelligence asset, and how those two people could have existed in the same body. About the fact that she'd lived with him for 18 years and never suspected, never asked the right questions, never really known him at all. The tears came then, silent, hot, running into her hair and soaking the expensive pillowcase. She cried for the father she'd lost, for the father she'd never really had, for the girl she'd been 2 days ago who thought the worst thing about closing shifts was cleaning the espresso machine. That girl was gone now. Charlotte Hayes fell asleep sometime near dawn, wrapped in lavender-scented sheets in a stranger's apartment, her father's final message burning itself into her memory. "When you're ready to know what I really did, start where we always started." She was ready now. God help her, she was ready. Charlotte woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disorienting realization that she had no idea what time it was. Her phone was gone, left behind in the warehouse or confiscated, she wasn't sure which. The room around her looked like it belonged to someone else's life. Expensive furniture, art on the walls that probably cost more than her student loans, silence so complete it felt manufactured. She sat up slowly, testing her body's response. Everything ached. Her wrists were purple with bruising, her shoulders stiff from hours zip-tied in uncomfortable positions. Her throat felt raw when she swallowed. But she was alive. The clothes from last night were folded on a chair by the door. Charlotte dressed quickly, ran fingers through her hair without bothering to look in a mirror, and stepped into the hallway. Voices drifted from somewhere ahead, low, male, speaking in that same language she'd heard in the warehouse. Russian, she was almost certain now. Charlotte followed the sound until she reached the main living area. Dominic Frost stood by the kitchen island with Marcus and 2 other men she didn't recognize. They stopped talking when she appeared, 3 sets of eyes tracking her movement with the kind of alertness that made her skin prickle. "Coffee?" Dominic asked, like this was a normal morning, like she hadn't been kidnapped 48 hours ago. "Please." He poured from a French press that looked designer, handed her a mug that probably cost $50. The coffee was perfect, rich, not bitter, the kind of quality Charlotte couldn't afford on a barista's salary, despite working around espresso machines 40 hours a week. "What time is it?" she asked. "Almost 2. You slept 14 hours. Charlotte took another sip of coffee to avoid responding. 14 hours. She'd lost an entire day. The deadline those men had given her, 48 hours, was long past. They'd have killed her by now if Dominic hadn't intervened. "We need to talk about next steps," Dominic said. The other men had disappeared while she wasn't paying attention, leaving just her and Dominic in the expansive kitchen. "The bookshop opens at 3. We can go then, or we can wait until tomorrow if you need more time." "Today," Charlotte said immediately. "I want to go today." Dominic studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Marcus will drive us. We'll take precautions, but I don't anticipate trouble. The organization that took you is dealing with significant operational disruptions right now. They won't risk another move this quickly." "How did you do that? Disrupt them?" "I made some calls, shared information with people who have been looking for reasons to take them down. Sometimes all it takes is pointing the right authorities in the right direction." He refilled his own coffee cup, movements precise. Your father understood that better than anyone. Information is power. Knowing when and how to deploy it, that's the real skill. Charlotte set her mug down on the marble countertop. I need you to tell me about him. Not the sanitized version, not the hero who saved your life. I need to know what he actually did. What I'm walking into. Dominic was quiet for long enough that Charlotte thought he might refuse. Then he gestured toward the leather couch. Sit. This will take a while. They sat across from each other, the same configuration as last night. Morning sunlight, afternoon sunlight now, Charlotte corrected herself, poured through the windows, making everything look too bright, too exposed. Your father started working in intelligence during graduate school, Dominic began. CIA recruited him through an academic program. They needed people who could move in educational circles, who had reasons to travel internationally for conferences and research. He was perfect, smart, personable, completely unremarkable. The kind of person who could sit in a faculty lounge and hear things people wouldn't say in front of anyone they considered a threat. So he was a spy. He was an asset. There's a difference. He wasn't running operations or carrying weapons. He listened, made connections, facilitated introductions between people who needed to talk but couldn't be seen together. For 20 years he did this. Built relationships across academic networks that spanned dozens of countries. Charlotte's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs to still them. And you? What's your role in all this? I run a private security firm. We do intelligence work for clients who can't or won't use official channels. Corporations dealing with industrial espionage. Wealthy individuals with stalking problems. Occasionally governments who need deniability. Dominic's expression didn't change, voice remaining perfectly level. Your father and I worked together on 3 operations over the years. He provided access. I provided muscle and extraction capabilities. It was mutually beneficial. Until it wasn't. Until he decided to go after something bigger than either of us had handled before. Dominic leaned back, fingers steepled. About 5 years ago, your father made contact with a mid-level administrator in Russian foreign intelligence. This person, we'll call them the source, had access to financial records showing massive corruption, money being siphoned from state budgets into private accounts, payoffs to foreign agents, the whole apparatus of how Russia buys influence in Western governments. Charlotte felt cold despite the sunlight. That's what he borrowed the money for, to pay this source. Yes, $350,000, half up front, half on delivery. He paid the first installment, got a sample of the documents to verify authenticity, then started working on securing the rest of the funds. Before he could make the second payment, he had a heart attack. And the source? Disappeared. Could be dead. Could be in a Russian prison. Could have taken the money and run. We don't know. Dominic's jaw tightened. What we do know is that your father managed to get the full document cash before he died. He paid the source somehow, pulled together the money, or traded something else. And he hid it. Why didn't he just give it to you, or to the CIA? Why hide it? Because he didn't trust anyone with it. Dominic stood, walked to the windows. By the end, your father had been in the game long enough to see how information gets weaponized, how it gets buried when it's inconvenient, leaked when it's useful, twisted to serve agendas that have nothing to do with truth or justice. He told me once that he'd acquired something that could reshape global power structures, that he needed to think very carefully about who received it. Charlotte joined him at the windows. Boston spread out below them, ordinary and familiar and completely divorced from the conversation they were having. So he hid it and left me a treasure map. He left you a choice, Dominic corrected. He could have destroyed the information. Instead, he made sure you could find it, if and when you decided to. That message on the postcard? When you're ready to know what I really did, he was giving you permission to walk away, to never look, to keep living your normal life. That option ended when those men grabbed me off the street. I know. Dominic turned to face her, which is why I'm offering you a different choice now. We go to the bookshop. We find what your father hid, and then you decide what happens to it. You can give it to me, I'll pay you the $200,000 he borrowed, clear his debt, and you walk away clean. Or you can keep it, use it however you see fit. I won't interfere. Charlotte laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Why would you do that? If this information is as valuable as you say, why give me any choice at all? Because your father trusted you with it, and I owe him. You already paid that debt. You saved my life. That was the minimum required to honor his memory, Dominic said quietly, respecting his wishes about the information. That's how I actually repay what he did for me. Charlotte studied him, trying to read past the careful, neutral expression. Dominic Frost was dangerous. She knew that instinctively, the same way prey animals know when a predator is near. But he was also offering her something no one else had: agency, control over her own fate. Okay, she said finally. Let's go to the bookshop. Marcus drove them in a black SUV with windows tinted dark enough that Charlotte couldn't see in from the outside. She sat in the back with Dominic while Marcus navigated Cambridge streets with the practiced ease of someone who knew the city intimately. Blackstone's rare books occupied the ground floor of a converted brownstone near Harvard Square. Charlotte had been coming here since childhood, every Saturday morning, her father leading her through the narrow aisles while she picked out whatever caught her eye. He'd never limited her choices, never told her she was too young for a particular book, just smiled and paid for whatever she wanted, no matter how expensive. She thought it was because he valued education, intellectual curiosity. Now she wondered if it had been something else. Training, maybe. Teaching her how to navigate spaces that held valuable things, how to recognize quality and authenticity. The bell above the door chimed when they entered. The shop looked exactly as Charlotte remembered. Floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with books, narrow pathways between stacks, the smell of old paper and leather bindings. An older man sat behind the counter near the back, reading glasses perched on his nose. Charlotte Hayes. He looked up, genuine warmth in his expression. I haven't seen you since your father's funeral. How are you holding up? I'm okay, Mr. Blackstone. The lie came automatically. This is Dominic Frost. We're looking for something my father might have left here. Blackstone's expression shifted, something careful entering his eyes. I see. Well, you know where the first editions are. Take your time. They moved deeper into the shop, past philosophy text and vintage atlases, until they reached the alcove that housed the rare first editions. The books here were kept behind glass, temperature-controlled, some worth thousands of dollars. Second shelf, Charlotte murmured, remembering the postcard. He said second shelf. She scanned the titles. Byron, Coleridge, Dickens, Eliot. Authors she recognized from her father's lectures, books he'd taught from for decades. Nothing stood out. Maybe there's something inside one of them, Dominic suggested. A note, a key, something hidden between pages. Charlotte glanced back toward the counter. Blackstone was watching them, pretending not to. Mr. Blackstone, could we look inside some of these? I think my father might have left something. The older man approached, pulling a keyring from his pocket. Your father did leave something, actually. Asked me to hold it for you. Said you'd come asking about first editions eventually. He unlocked the case, reached behind a row of books, and produced a manila envelope. Charlotte's hands trembled as she took it. The envelope was sealed, her name written on the front in her father's handwriting. He left this 3 weeks before he died, Blackstone said softly. Told me not to give it to you unless you asked specifically about the second shelf. Said if you never asked, I should destroy it unopened after 10 years. Thank you. Charlotte's voice came out barely above a whisper. They returned to the SUV. Marcus drove without asking questions while Charlotte stared at the envelope in her lap. It wasn't thick, maybe 20 pages inside, if that. 20 pages worth $200,000. Worth her father's life. You don't have to open it now, Dominic said. We can go back to the apartment. You can take your time. Charlotte shook her head. Her fingers found the envelope seal, tore it open before she could second-guess herself. Inside, a USB drive and a letter. The letter was typed, single-spaced, 2 pages long. Charlotte read it twice, then a third time, trying to make the words connect to meaning. Charlie, it began. No dear daughter, no preamble. Just her childhood nickname, the one only her father used. If you're reading this, I'm dead, and you've decided to know the truth. I'm sorry. Not sorry for the work I did. I believe in it. believe the world is safer because of information I've gathered and connections I've facilitated. But sorry that you're caught in it now. Sorry that my choices have consequences for you. The USB drive contains financial records from Russian intelligence operations spanning 15 years, account numbers, transaction histories, names of Western officials who've accepted bribes. It's comprehensive enough to trigger investigations that could destabilize relationships between major powers, enough to get people killed. I've left it to you because I trust your judgment more than I trust any government agency or intelligence organization. They'll all want to use this information for their own purposes. You might too. That's your right. But I want you to understand what you're holding. This isn't just data. These are people's lives. Some of them deserve what will happen if this goes public. Some of them are caught in impossible situations, making bad choices because the alternatives are worse. You'll have to decide which is which. If you want to walk away, give the drive to Dominic Frost. He'll pay what I owe and handle things cleanly. If you want to pursue this, I've included contact information for 3 people who can help: journalists, investigators, people I trust. Your choice. I'm proud of you, Charlie. Prouder than I ever managed to say out loud. You're braver and smarter than I ever was. Whatever you decide, I know it will be the right choice. Love always, Dad. Charlotte folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the envelope with the USB drive. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not now. What does it say? Dominic asked. That I need to decide what to do with 15 years of Russian intelligence corruption. And have you decided? Charlotte looked out the window at Cambridge sliding past. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that somewhere in this city, a barista/graduate student was holding enough information to redraw political maps. Not yet. Back at the apartment, Dominic set her up with a laptop. Clean machine, he assured her, not connected to any networks. Safe to plug in the USB drive without risk of triggering tracking software. Charlotte sat at the kitchen island and opened the first file. Numbers. So many numbers. Account transfers, wire receipts, coded transaction descriptions that probably meant something to people who understood intelligence finance. Names she recognized from news coverage, senators, diplomats, corporate executives, and names she didn't, which were somehow more disturbing. This is real, she said after an hour of scrolling. This isn't fabricated. I know. Dominic had been reading over her shoulder, silent until now. Your father verified authenticity before he paid for it. Had forensic accountants look at the sample documents. Everything checked out. Who knows I have this? Aside from you and me? No one. The organization that kidnapped you suspected your father left something valuable, but they don't know what or where. As far as anyone else is concerned, this information is still lost. Charlotte closed the laptop. Her head throbbed. Dehydration probably, or delayed shock, or just the weight of too much reality compressed into too little time. I need to think. Take as long as you need. Those men who took me. You said they're dealing with federal investigations. What happens when those wrap up? Do they come after me again? Dominic's expression went carefully neutral. They won't be in a position to come after anyone. The evidence I provided to federal authorities is comprehensive. Most of their leadership will be in prison by next month. The organization itself will collapse. You destroyed them. I removed a threat. They crossed a line when they touched you. That couldn't stand. Charlotte studied him, this man her father had trusted enough to name in a letter, who'd mobilized a private army to rescue her, who was now giving her space to make choices about world-altering information. What do you get out of this? If I give you the drive, what do you do with it? Exactly what your father would have wanted. I analyze it, identify the people who most deserve exposure, leak strategically to journalists who will handle it responsibly. Some of it might go to intelligence agencies, the pieces that prevent immediate harm. The rest gets published where it'll do the most good. And if I don't give it to you, then you make those decisions yourself, or you destroy it, or you sit on it for 10 years while you figure out what you believe. Dominic moved to the refrigerator, pulled out bottled water, handed her one. I meant what I said, Charlotte. This is your choice. I'm not going to pressure you. Everyone wants something, Charlotte said. That's what I learned in the warehouse. Everyone has an angle. What's yours? For the first time since she'd met him, Dominic smiled, genuine, reaching his eyes. Your father asked me the same question once, after Prague, after he'd saved my life. Wanted to know what I'd want in return. He took a drink of water. I told him the same thing I'm telling you. Some debts can't be repaid in kind. You just carry them. Try to be worthy of them. Charlotte's phone buzzed, except she didn't have her phone. It took her a moment to realize the sound came from the counter where Dominic had set a new phone, still in packaging. Yours was damaged, he explained. I took the liberty of having it replaced. Same number. All your contacts restored from cloud backup. Charlotte picked up the phone. The screen showed 3 missed calls from Becca and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. You need to call your roommate, Dominic said. Let her know you're safe. The cover story is that you were helping police with an investigation related to your father. They needed you somewhere secure for a few days. Don't mention the kidnapping, don't mention the warehouse. If she asks about the cafe incident, tell her it was connected, but you can't discuss details. You want me to lie to her? I want you alive. The people who took you have been neutralized, but there are always others. The less your roommate knows, the safer she is. Charlotte hated that he was right. She unlocked the phone and called Becca. Her roommate answered on the first ring. Jesus Christ, Charlotte, where the hell have you been? I've been losing my mind. The police called asking about you. Margaret from the cafe said you were there with some men who tied her up, and you haven't answered your phone in 3 days. I'm okay, Charlotte said, injecting as much calm into her voice as she could manage. I'm sorry I scared you. I was helping police with something related to my dad. They needed me somewhere secure, and I couldn't have my phone. It's complicated. Are you in danger? No, not anymore. It's handled. Becca exhaled slowly. When are you coming home? Charlotte glanced at Dominic, who nodded slightly. Tomorrow, probably. I just need to finish up here and then I'll be back. Can you tell Professor Martinez I'll have my thesis proposal done by next week? I know I'm late, but... Charlotte, fuck the thesis proposal. I'm just glad you're alive. Becca's voice cracked. You scared me. Really scared me. I know. I'm sorry. I'll explain everything when I get home, okay? You better. They said goodbye. Charlotte set the phone down and realized her hands were shaking again. The normalcy of that conversation, Becca worried about thesis deadlines and roommate communication, felt obscene next to the USB drive sitting on the counter. You should eat something, Dominic said. You haven't had real food in days. He ordered takeout from somewhere expensive, Thai food that arrived in real dishes, not containers, delivered by someone who wore a uniform and probably made more per delivery than Charlotte earned in a shift. They ate at the kitchen island, mostly in silence, while afternoon bled into evening. I have a question, Charlotte said finally, pushing pad thai around her plate. If this information is as dangerous as everyone says, why did my father think I could handle it? I'm 23. I'm a graduate student. I have no training in intelligence or politics or any of this. You're asking why he trusted you with it. I'm asking why he thought I wouldn't get killed the minute I touched it. Dominic set down his fork. Because you're not in the game, that's your advantage. You don't have institutional loyalties or career considerations or bureaucratic pressure. You can make choices based purely on what you believe is right. Your father understood that kind of clarity is rare, valuable. Or I make the wrong choice and people die. People die regardless, Dominic said flatly. That's the reality of this world. The question isn't whether you can prevent all harm. It's whether you can do more good than damage. Charlotte pushed her plate away, appetite gone. I need to sleep on this. Decide in the morning. Take as long as you need. She retreated to the guest room, lay on top of the covers fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Her mind wouldn't quiet. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the warehouse, felt zip ties cutting into her wrists, heard the boss's calm voice explaining how they'd sell her if she couldn't produce money she'd never had. Her father had lived in this world for decades, moved through it calmly, teaching Victorian poetry by day and trading state secrets by night, never letting the two lives bleed together where she could see the seams. How had he done it? How had he looked at her across the dinner table and asked about her homework while carrying information that could destabilize governments? And what did it mean that he'd trusted her, barely adult Charlotte, who still called him when her car made weird noises, with the most dangerous thing he'd ever touched? Charlotte rolled onto her side, pulled her knees to her chest. She'd cried herself empty in this bed last night. Now she just felt hollow, scraped out, like someone had removed all her insides and forgotten to put them back. The door opened quietly. Charlotte tensed, then relaxed when she recognized Marcus's silhouette. "Boss wanted me to check on you," he said. "Make sure you're okay." "I'm fine." "You're not. But that's normal." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "For what it's worth. Your father made the right call. Dominic's one of the good ones. He'll do right by you. How long have you worked for him?" 8 years. He pulled me out of a bad situation in Syria, gave me a job when no one else would touch me." Marcus shrugged. "I've seen him turn down contracts worth millions because they involved hurting people who didn't deserve it. Seen him spend his own money extracting assets who got burned. He's not perfect, but he's honest. That counts for something in this world." Charlotte sat up. "Can I ask you something about how this works?" "Shoot." "If I give Dominic the USB drive, what happens to me? Do I just go back to my normal life? Finish my thesis, work at the cafe, pretend none of this happened?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You could try, but people who've been where you've been, kidnapped, threatened, seen behind the curtain, they don't usually go back to normal. Normal stops fitting right, like wearing shoes that are half a size too small. So what do I do instead?" "That's your call. Some people run, change cities, change names, try to forget. Some people lean in, learn to navigate this world, make themselves useful enough that they're safer inside the game than outside it." He straightened. "Get some sleep. Things will look clearer in the morning." After he left, Charlotte lay back down and tried to imagine her future. Both versions, the one where she walked away clean and the one where she didn't. Neither felt real. Neither felt possible. She must have slept eventually because she woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. Her internal clock was completely wrecked. She had no sense of how many hours had passed or what time it was. Charlotte found Dominic in the kitchen again, this time on the phone, speaking rapid Russian. He held up one finger in a wait gesture, finished the conversation, and hung up. "Morning," he said. "Or afternoon, technically. You slept 12 hours. "I didn't mean to." "Your body needed it." He poured coffee, handed it to her. "Have you made a decision?" Charlotte wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the warmth ground her. "I want to see the list of contacts my father left, the journalists and investigators." Dominic's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a relaxing of tension she hadn't realized was there. "I can arrange meetings." "But Charlotte, you need to understand what you're walking into. Once you start down this path, once people know you have this information, you become a target, not just from Russians, from everyone. Intelligence agencies who want to bury it, politicians who want to spin it, other criminals who want to leverage it. So I need protection. You need training. You need to understand how this world works, how to recognize threats, how to move safely." He set his coffee down, met her eyes directly. "I can provide that, but it means staying here, in my world, for a while, learning the rules, becoming someone who can't be easily grabbed off a street." Charlotte thought about her apartment, her roommate, her thesis proposal, her old life waiting for her across the city, familiar and safe and completely inadequate for what she'd become. "Okay," she said, "teach me." Dominic smiled, small, controlled, but genuine. "Then we start now. First lesson, never make important decisions on an empty stomach. Breakfast first, then we talk strategy." He cooked, actually cooked, not ordered takeout, while Charlotte sat at the island and watched. Eggs, bacon, toast, simple food that tasted better than it had any right to. "The journalist your father recommended," Dominic said while they ate. "2 are in the States, 1's in Berlin. All of them have track records of handling sensitive material responsibly. I vetted them independently. They're solid. When can I meet them?" "The Berlin contact is actually in New York next week for a conference. I can arrange a meeting there, neutral ground, public place. You present what you have, gauge their reaction, decide if you trust them." "And the Russians, the ones who paid my father, are they looking for this?" "Almost certainly, but they don't know you have it. As far as anyone can tell, your father destroyed the information before he died. We keep it that way until you're ready to move." Dominic finished his eggs, pushed the plate aside. "In the meantime, you learn self-defense, situational awareness, how to spot surveillance, how to communicate securely, All the things your father should have taught you but didn't because he was trying to protect you. By keeping me ignorant. By giving you the option of ignorance. Dominic stood, cleared their plates. He wanted you to have a choice. Most people in this world don't get that. Charlotte's new phone buzzed again. Another message from Becca, this one just asking when she'd be home. Charlotte stared at it, trying to formulate a response that wasn't a lie, but also wasn't the truth. You can go back, Dominic said, reading her hesitation. Spend time with your roommate, maintain your cover. But Charlotte, he waited until she looked up. The men who took you are neutralized, but the threat isn't gone. You're carrying information worth killing for. Until we move it safely, you need to be careful. Aware. Different. I know. I don't think you do. Not yet. Dominic's voice was gentle but firm. You're thinking this is temporary, that you'll handle the USB drive and then everything goes back to normal. But normal ended when your father died, maybe before that. The minute he decided to leave you this information, your path changed. You just didn't know it yet. Charlotte set her phone down. So what does my new path look like? That depends on what you decide about the drive. If you want to publish it, you become someone who exposed massive corruption, famous, protected by publicity, but also a permanent target. If you give it to intelligence agencies, you become an asset they'll want to keep close. If you sit on it, you become someone dangerous precisely because people don't know what you'll do. Those are all terrible options. Welcome to your father's world. Dominic leaned against the counter. The only way to be truly safe is to destroy the drive. Delete everything, smash it, make sure the information can never surface. Then you're just a graduate student whose father died, nothing special, no threat to anyone. Charlotte looked at him. You'd be okay with that? After everything you did to help me find it? I'd respect it. Your father gave you this choice for a reason. He knew you might decide the cost was too high. The USB drive sat on the counter between them, innocuous and deadly. Charlotte picked it up, turned it over in her hand. Such a small thing to carry so much weight. I'm not destroying it, she said. My father died getting this. People paid him for it. Others... She stopped, throat tight. Others kidnapped me trying to find it. I'm not letting all that be for nothing. Then we moved forward, carefully. Dominic pulled out his phone. I'll set up the meeting in New York. While we wait, you train. Marcus will work with you on physical security. I'll handle everything else. What about my life, my apartment, my job, school? Keep them, maintain your cover, but understand their cover now, not your actual life. He met her eyes. Your actual life is standing here holding stolen Russian intelligence. Everything else is just window dressing. Charlotte wanted to argue, to insist that her thesis and her cafe shifts and her friendship with Becca were real, were important. But Dominic was right. She could feel it in the way her priorities had shifted, the way concerns that had consumed her a week ago now felt distant and small. She'd been taken, threatened, nearly sold, rescued by a man who operated in shadows, who commanded teams with military precision, who spoke casually about dismantling criminal organizations like it was routine business. And her father, her mild-mannered, poetry-teaching father, had been part of this world all along. Nothing about her life made sense anymore. Maybe it never had. Okay, Charlotte said again. Teach me. Show me how this works. I'm ready. Dominic smiled that small, controlled smile. No, you're not, but you will be. Training started that afternoon in a basement Charlotte hadn't known existed. She'd assumed the penthouse was the full extent of Dominic's property, but apparently the building's lower levels housed something else entirely. A facility that looked like a high-end gym crossed with a military training center. Mats covered one section of floor. Weight equipment lined the walls. A shooting range occupied the far end, soundproofed and climate-controlled. Marcus was waiting when they arrived, dressed in athletic gear that made him look even more dangerous than the tactical outfit from the warehouse rescue. We'll start simple, he said, gesturing Charlotte onto the mats. How to fall without breaking bones. How to break someone's grip. Basic stuff that might save your life if things go sideways. Charlotte had taken self-defense classes in college, the kind where instructors taught you to aim for eyes and throats, to scream and run. Those lessons evaporated the moment actual violence appeared. She'd frozen when those men grabbed her, body refusing to cooperate with anything her brain suggested. I froze, she admitted, when they took me. I knew what I was supposed to do, but I just couldn't. Everyone freezes the first time, Marcus said, not unkindly. The goal isn't to turn you into some action hero who fights off 6 attackers. The goal is to buy yourself 3 seconds. 3 seconds to run, to break free, to create distance. That's all you need. They spent 2 hours on basics. How to tuck her chin when someone grabbed her from behind. How to drive her elbow into vulnerable spots. How to drop her weight suddenly, making herself harder to lift. Simple movements that felt awkward and ineffective until Marcus explained the physics behind them. You're small, he said bluntly. You're always going to be at a size disadvantage, so you use momentum, speed, surprise. You don't fight fair. You hurt them fast and get gone. Charlotte's muscles burned. Sweat soaked through her borrowed t-shirt. But something shifted during that session, some internal recalibration that made her body feel less like an enemy that had betrayed her in the van and more like a tool she was learning to use properly. Enough for today, Marcus finally announced. You'll be sore tomorrow. That's normal. We'll work through it. Dominic had been watching from the sidelines, speaking quietly on his phone. He ended the call as Charlotte grabbed a water bottle. The journalist from Berlin confirmed for next Tuesday, he said. Her name is Katerina Volkova. She's broken major stories about Russian corruption before. Spent 6 months in a Polish prison for it, but the article's held up. She's legitimate. What do I tell her? As little as possible until you're sure you trust her. Show her samples from the drive. Enough to prove what you have, but not enough to compromise the full data set. Gauge her reaction. If she's who your father thought she was, you'll know. Charlotte toweled off her face, trying to imagine that conversation. Hi, I'm a grad student whose dead father was a spy, and I have information that could destabilize international relations. Want to help publish it? The absurdity made her want to laugh or scream, or both. What about the other contacts, she asked. The 2 in the States? One's a financial crimes investigator. Former FBI, now works independently. He could analyze the money flows, trace the accounts, build cases that would hold up in court. The other's a documentary filmmaker who specializes in corruption exposés. Both solid, both trustworthy according to your father's assessment. And according to yours? Dominic smiled slightly. I've had them under surveillance for the past 6 months. Light touch. Just enough to verify they are who they claim to be. No red flags, no hidden agendas as far as I can determine. The casual admission that he'd been spying on people her father trusted should have disturbed Charlotte more than it did. Instead, she found it almost comforting, proof that Dominic took security seriously, that he wasn't just throwing her into situations blind. I should go home, she said. Check in with Becca. Try to pretend everything's normal. Marcus will drive you. He'll also be staying close, not surveillance, just security. You won't see him most of the time, but he'll be there if you need him. Charlotte wanted to argue that she didn't need a bodyguard, that she could take care of herself. But 2 days ago, she'd been grabbed off the street in a neighborhood she knew well, at a time she'd thought was safe. Her judgment about what constituted danger had been comprehensively proven worthless. Okay, she said. Thank you. The drive back to her apartment felt surreal. Marcus took side streets, checking mirrors compulsively, while Charlotte watched Boston slide past the window. Normal people doing normal things, walking dogs, carrying groceries, arguing on cell phones. She'd been one of them a week ago. Now she felt like an alien studying human behavior from the outside. Her apartment building looked exactly the same. 3 stories, brick facade, the front door that stuck if you didn't lift while turning the key. Charlotte climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, stood outside her door for a long moment before unlocking it. Becca was on the couch, laptop open, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee mugs. She looked up when Charlotte entered, and her expression cycled through relief and anger and something harder to name. You're alive, Becca said flatly. I'm alive. You want to tell me what the hell happened? Because the version where you were helping police with something related to your dad doesn't explain why Margaret from the cafe was tied up, or why you haven't been answering my calls, or why you look like you haven't slept in a week. Charlotte set her bag down carefully, buying time to construct a response that wasn't a complete lie. My father had debts I didn't know about. People came looking for payment. It got complicated. The police helped sort it out. What kind of debts? The kind you don't want to know about. Becca closed her laptop. Charlotte, I've been your roommate for 3 years. I know when you're lying. You're terrible at it. So either tell me the truth or tell me you can't talk about it, but don't insult me with half-assed cover stories. Charlotte sat down on the opposite end of the couch. Her entire body ached from training, from stress, from carrying secrets that felt like physical weight. I can't talk about it. Not because I don't want to. Because the less you know, the safer you are. That's not ominous at all. I know how it sounds, but Becca... Charlotte met her roommate's eyes. My father wasn't who I thought he was. He was involved in things I didn't know about, dangerous things, and now I'm dealing with the fallout. The people who came after me have been handled. I'm not in immediate danger. But I need you to trust me when I say that you're better off not knowing details. Becca studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed, running both hands through her hair. Is this going to keep happening? Am I going to wake up and find you missing again? Should I be looking for a new roommate? No, I don't think so. I'm trying to handle it. Charlotte pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. I know I'm asking a lot. Asking you to just accept that things are weird right now and trust that I'll explain when I can. You're asking me to pretend my roommate didn't get kidnapped or whatever actually happened? Charlotte flinched at the word, even though Becca had hit it exactly. Yeah, I guess I am. Okay, Becca said after a pause. But Charlotte, if this gets worse, if you need help or you're in over your head, you tell me. You don't just disappear and hope I won't notice. Deal? Deal? They ordered Thai food, different from what Dominic had bought but somehow less satisfying, and spent the evening watching terrible reality TV, both of them pretending things were normal. Charlotte's phone buzzed periodically with messages from Dominic and Marcus, logistics for the New York trip, reminders about training schedules. She answered quickly, keeping the screen angled away from Becca's line of sight. That night, lying in her own bed for the first time in days, Charlotte couldn't sleep. The apartment felt simultaneously too familiar and completely foreign. She knew the sounds, the radiator's clank, the upstairs neighbor's footsteps, traffic from the street below. But she heard threats in all of them now, potential dangers where before there'd only been mundane urban noise. Her phone lit up with a text from Marcus. All quiet, get some rest. Charlotte typed back, How do you know I'm awake? Bedroom lights still on. She got up and looked out the window, but couldn't spot him anywhere. The street below showed only parked cars and empty sidewalks, the usual late-night landscape of a residential Boston neighborhood. Marcus was out there somewhere, watching, but invisible. Charlotte turned off the light and tried to sleep. The next week passed in a strange double exposure of old life and new. She went to campus, met with her advisor, worked on her thesis proposal with half her attention while the other half obsessed over USB drives and Russian intelligence. She pulled shifts at the cafe, making lattes and cleaning the espresso machine, while Marcus sat in a corner booth pretending to read a newspaper from 1995. She attended a graduate seminar on feminist theory and couldn't focus on anything the professor said because she kept thinking about account numbers and political corruption. Her training continued every other evening in Dominic's basement facility. Marcus taught her how to check her car for tampering, how to vary her routes home, how to spot surveillance in crowds. Dominic worked with her on something he called information compartmentalization, keeping details separated in her mind so that if someone questioned her, she couldn't accidentally reveal connections. You know what you need to know, he explained. Nothing more. If someone asks about the journalist contacts, you can honestly say you've never met them. If they ask about the USB drive's contents, you know there's financial data, but you haven't memorized specifics. Ignorance is protection. Plausible deniability, Charlotte said. Exactly. Your father was excellent at it. He could talk for hours about Victorian literature and never once mentioned that he'd just facilitated a meeting between CIA handlers and Russian defectors. 2 completely separate lives, no bleed-through. Charlotte wondered if that was admirable or disturbing. Maybe both. Tuesday arrived cold and rainy. Charlotte dressed carefully, professional but not formal, graduate student who could be meeting an academic contact for coffee. Marcus drove her to South Station where they caught an Amtrak to New York. First class, which Charlotte had never experienced before. Marcus sat across the aisle apparently absorbed in his phone, but actually watching everyone who passed their seats. Relax, sis, he he murmured without looking at her. You're broadcasting anxiety. Breathe. Charlotte tried. Her hands kept finding the USB drive in her jacket pocket, touching it compulsively like a talisman. She'd copied the files onto 3 separate drives, one for herself, one secured in Dominic's apartment, one she was carrying now. Redundancy, Dominic had explained. Never keep your only copy of something this valuable in one location. The train pulled into Penn Station 3.5 hours later. They took a taxi to a hotel in Midtown, the kind of place with doormen and marble lobbies where tourists and business travelers mixed anonymously. Katerina Volkova had a room on the 14th floor. They were meeting in the hotel restaurant, public and visible. No chance of anyone cornering Charlotte in a private space. Marcus checked the restaurant first, doing a slow circuit while pretending to look for someone. He returned and nodded. Clear. She's alone at a corner table. I'll be at the bar. Charlotte entered, scanning faces until she spotted a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair pulled back severely. Katerina looked up as Charlotte approached, and something that might have been recognition flickered across her face. You have your father's eyes, she said by way of greeting. Her accent was Russian, but her English was flawless. Sit. Would you like coffee? It's terrible here, but drinkable. Charlotte sat. A waiter appeared and she ordered tea she wouldn't drink, just to have something to do with her hands. You're younger than I expected, Katerina continued. When Robert told me about his daughter, I pictured someone older, more experienced. He didn't tell me about you at all, Charlotte said. Not until after he died. No, he wouldn't have. Too dangerous. Katerina stirred her coffee slowly, metal spoon clicking against ceramic. I was sorry to hear about his death. Heart attack, yes? Convenient timing for some people. The implication hung between them. Charlotte had assumed her father's death was natural, tragic, but not suspicious. But now she wondered. If he'd been gathering information worth killing for, if he'd been involved with dangerous people. Do you think someone caused it? She asked quietly. I think Robert made powerful enemies. Whether any of them acted on that, I don't know. But the timing, Katerina shrugged. 3 weeks after he acquired the intelligence package, before he could deliver it to anyone, it raises questions. Charlotte's stomach turned over. She'd been operating under the assumption that her father had died randomly, that the heart attack was just bad luck. If someone had murdered him, if they'd made it look natural, why would they kill him before he delivered? She managed. If they wanted the information, maybe they wanted it buried, or maybe they thought killing him would flush out whoever he was working with, make the contacts reveal themselves trying to recover what he'd acquired. Katerina's gaze was sharp, assessing. Which brings us to why we're sitting here. You have something to show me? Charlotte pulled the USB drive from her pocket, but didn't hand it over. First, I need to know what you do with it. My father trusted you, but I don't know you. I need to understand your process. Fair. Katerina leaned back. I would verify authenticity, hire forensic accountants, cross-reference with known intelligence, confirm the documents are real. Then I would analyze the contents, identify which revelations are most significant and most verifiable. I'd reach out to implicated parties for comment, giving them chance to respond. Then I'd publish through multiple outlets simultaneously, major newspapers, online platforms, distributed enough that no single government could suppress it. And the people named in the documents, the ones taking bribes, would face consequences, loss of position, criminal investigations, public disgrace. Some would deserve it. Others, Katerina's expression softened marginally, others might be people caught in impossible situations. Intelligence work is rarely black and white, but the corruption itself, the system that enables it, that needs exposure. Charlotte turned the USB drive over in her hands. My father said you spent time in a Polish prison. 6 months. The government didn't appreciate my reporting on how Russian money was flowing into their political system. They arrested me on trumped-up charges, held me until international pressure forced my release. Katerina smiled without humor. It was not pleasant, but the stories held up. 3 officials resigned, 2 went to prison. The money flow stopped, at least through those channels. Was it worth 6 months of my life? I believe so. What if this information starts a war, or gets people killed who don't deserve it? Then those deaths are on the people who created the corrupt system, not on you for exposing it. Katerina's voice was firm. Secrecy protects the guilty. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, as your American saying goes. Someone will always argue that revealing the truth is dangerous, that it's better to maintain stability even if that stability is built on lies. I've never believed that. Charlotte thought about her father, about the double life he'd led, about whether he'd believed that exposure was always better than secrecy. He'd held on to this information for months, hidden it rather than publishing immediately. Why? My father could have given this to you before he died, she said. He didn't. Why do you think that was? Katerina considered this. Perhaps he was waiting for the right moment. Intelligence is about timing as much as content. Released too early and people dismiss it as unverified. Too late, and it's old news, already superseded by new scandals. Or perhaps, she paused, perhaps he wanted you to make the choice, to not have it be his decision. That's a lot of responsibility to drop on someone who didn't ask for it. Welcome to being Robert Hayes' daughter. Katerina's expression was sympathetic but unyielding. Your father brought you into this world the moment he acquired that information and left you his postcard. You can be angry about that. You're entitled, but you still have to decide what to do with it. Charlotte set the USB drive on the table between them. Katerina looked at it, but didn't reach for it. Samples only, Charlotte said. 3 documents I selected, enough to prove what I have and let you verify authenticity. If you want the full data set, we negotiate terms. What terms? I want final approval on what gets published and when. I want protection, for me, for anyone else who might be at risk when this goes public. And I want some of the information held back, insurance, in case things go wrong. Katerina's eyebrows rose. You've been taking lessons from someone. Robert wouldn't have negotiated like that. Too trusting. This sounds like Dominic Frost. Charlotte kept her expression neutral, despite her surprise. You know Dominic? We've crossed paths. He's more careful than your father was. More paranoid. It's kept him alive longer. Katerina picked up the USB drive, examined it. I agree to your terms. With one addition. I get to bring in my own forensic team for verification. I trust your father's judgment, but I verify everything independently. Acceptable. They shook hands. Katerina pocketed the drive and signaled for the check. I'll need 2 weeks for initial verification. If the samples check out, we'll meet again to discuss timeline and strategy. In the meantime, Charlotte, she stood, gathered her coat. Be careful. The documents on this drive implicate very powerful people. They won't react kindly to exposure. I know. I don't think you do. Not yet. Katerina's voice softened. Robert knew. It's why he spent 20 years looking over his shoulder. Why he never remarried after your mother died. Never let anyone get too close. The work he did, the information he handled, it makes you a permanent target. Once you cross that line, you can't go back. She left cash on the table and walked out of the restaurant. Charlotte sat alone for a moment, watching her disappear into the hotel lobby. Then she joined Marcus at the bar. How'd it go? He asked quietly. I think I just committed myself to exposing international corruption. Could be worse. Could have sold it to the highest bidder. They took a different train back to Boston, Marcus's paranoia insisting on varied routes. Charlotte dozed fitfully, forehead pressed against the cold window, while her mind spun through implications. If her father had been murdered, if someone had killed him to bury the information, then they'd be looking for her next. Once Katerina published, once the documents became public, Charlotte would be identified as the source, marked, targeted. Dominic had said she could walk away, destroy the drive, return to normal life. But normal life meant letting her father's death be meaningless, meant letting whoever killed him, if someone had, get away with it, meant staying silent while corruption continued unchecked. She couldn't do that. Wouldn't. The realization settled over her like a physical weight. She'd made her choice, really, the moment she'd walked into Blackstone's bookshop. Maybe even before that. Maybe the choice had been made for her the day her father scrawled that message on a postcard and pinned it to a cafe bulletin board. Back in Boston, Marcus drove her to Dominic's apartment instead of her own. Boss wants to debrief, he explained. Dominic was waiting in the living room, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking more human than Charlotte had seen him. He'd been working, papers spread across the coffee table, laptop open, the detritus of someone deep in focused analysis. "How was Katerina?" he asked as Charlotte collapsed onto the couch. "Intense, smart. She knew about you, by the way. We worked together once. I provided security for a source she was meeting in Istanbul. She's solid. If anyone can handle this material responsibly, it's her." Dominic closed his laptop. "Did she agree to your terms?" "Yes. She wants 2 weeks for verification, then we negotiate publication strategy." "That's faster than I expected. She must have cleared her schedule." He stood, moved to the windows. Outside, Boston glittered in the darkness, millions of people living lives that didn't involve stolen intelligence or dead spies. "Charlotte, I need to tell you something. While you were in New York, I got word from contacts in Russia. Someone's been asking questions about your father's final acquisition. Specifically, they're looking for anyone who might have inherited his work." Charlotte's chest tightened. "They know about me. They know Robert had a daughter. They don't know you have the files, but they're looking. It's why I wanted you here tonight instead of your apartment, just a precaution." "How serious is the threat?" "Serious enough that I've increased security. Marcus will be staying closer. I've also reached out to the FBI. There are people there who owe me favors. They're opening an investigation into the organization that kidnapped you. It'll provide cover, make you look like a witness under federal protection rather than someone holding valuable intelligence." Charlotte processed this. The world was narrowing, options constricting. She'd thought she had time to figure things out, to make careful decisions. But if Russian intelligence was actively looking for her— "I can't go home," she said. It wasn't a question. "Not safely, not right now." Dominic's expression was carefully neutral. "The guest room here is yours as long as you need it. You can still go to campus, still pull cafe shifts if you're careful. But the apartment you share with Becca, that's a known address. Too easy to watch, too vulnerable. Becca's gonna love this. Becca will understand if you explain properly. Tell her you're staying with a friend while security issues get sorted out. It's not even a lie." Charlotte laughed bitterly. "None of this is a lie anymore. It's just my life now." She called Becca from the guest room, staring at furniture that was becoming familiar. Her roommate answered on the third ring, background noise suggesting she was at a bar or party. "Hey," Charlotte said, "I need to tell you something." "You're not coming back," Becca said flatly. The background noise cut off. She'd stepped outside or found somewhere quiet. "Whatever's happening, it's not over. It's not over. I'm staying with someone who can provide better security than our apartment. Just temporarily, until things settle." "Charlotte, what the hell did your father do?" "I can't." "Don't tell me you can't talk about it. I'm your roommate. We've lived together for 3 years. You owe me more than cryptic warnings and disappearances." Charlotte closed her eyes. Becca was right. She did owe her more, but how much could she say without putting Becca at risk, without dragging her into something she couldn't handle? "My father gathered information for people," Charlotte said carefully. "Intelligence work, I guess you'd call it. He left me something valuable, and now there are people who want it. I'm handling it, but it's complicated and it's dangerous, and I need to be somewhere secure until it's resolved." Silence on the other end. "Then, are you safe right now? This person you're staying with, are they trustworthy?" "Yes. He knew my father. He's been protecting me." "He?" "It's not like that. It's professional. Security." "Okay." Becca exhaled slowly. "Okay. But Charlotte, if this goes bad, if you need help, you call me. I don't care if it's dangerous or complicated or whatever. You call." "I will, I promise." After they hung up, Charlotte sat in the dark guest room and tried to remember what her life had looked like a week ago. The thesis proposal that had seemed so urgent. The shift work schedule she'd organized so carefully. The mundane worries about rent and groceries and whether she'd remembered to buy milk. All of it felt like someone else's life. Someone who died in that warehouse, zip-tied and terrified, waiting for men with guns to decide her fate. The girl who'd survived was someone different, someone harder. Someone who negotiated with investigative journalists and carried stolen intelligence and slept in a penthouse owned by a man who commanded private armies. Charlotte didn't know who this new person was yet, but she was learning. Training intensified. Marcus pushed her harder, introducing scenarios where she had to think under pressure. Someone grabbed her from behind while she was distracted. Could she break free? Someone followed her through a crowded space. Could she spot them and evade? Basic combat skills layered with operational awareness, building muscle memory and paranoia in equal measure. "You're getting better," Marcus admitted after a particularly brutal session. Charlotte had managed to break his hold 3 times in a row, using techniques that were finally starting to feel instinctive rather than theoretical. "Your reaction time's improving. You're starting to read situations before they develop." "I hate that I need this," Charlotte said, catching her breath. "I hate that knowing how to elbow someone in the throat is now a practical life skill." "Welcome to the club. Nobody chooses this. You just adapt or you don't survive." Dominic started including her in strategic planning. He'd spread files across his dining table. Not her father's documents, but his own intelligence, networks he was tracking, threats he was monitoring. He walked her through how he assessed risks, how he determined which information was actionable and which was noise. "Your father was good at collection," Dominic explained. "Getting people to trust him, extracting details they didn't mean to share. But he was weak on analysis. He'd gather everything and then hand it off to someone else to make sense of. You need to be able to do both." They worked late into the night sometimes, Charlotte learning to read intelligence reports the way she'd once analyzed Victorian poetry, looking for patterns, subtext, connections that weren't explicitly stated. Her academic training translated surprisingly well. Close reading was close reading whether you were dissecting Tennyson or Russian financial records. "You're a natural at this," Dominic said one evening, almost surprised. They'd been working through a complex money laundering scheme, tracing funds through shell corporations, and Charlotte had spotted a connection he'd missed. "I'm good at research. It's just a different kind of archive." "It's more than that. You think like your father did, laterally making connections other people miss." He could look at seemingly unrelated pieces of information and see the pattern. "So can you." Charlotte didn't know if that was a compliment or an accusation. Some days she resented her father for the legacy he'd left her. Other days she felt closer to him than she had when he was alive, finally understanding the work that had consumed him. 2 weeks after the New York meeting, Katerina sent an encrypted message through channels Dominic had established. The documents checked out, everything verified. She wanted to meet again to discuss publication timeline. This time they met in Washington, D.C., in a restaurant near the National Mall where politicians and lobbyists conducted business over expensive lunches. Katerina had brought someone, a man in his 60s who Katerina introduced as Daniel Carver, the former FBI agent turned independent investigator. "Robert mentioned you in his notes," Daniel said, shaking Charlotte's hand. His grip was firm, professional. "Said you'd inherited his stubbornness and his ethics. Looks like he was right." They ordered food none of them touched and talked through logistics. Katerina had assembled a team, forensic accountants, regional experts, fact-checkers. They'd verified 70% of the documents on Charlotte's sample drive. Everything checked out so far. "We're ready to move forward," Katerina said. "But there's a complication. Someone else is also investigating these networks. American intelligence. They've noticed our inquiries, made contact. They want the information." Charlotte's stomach dropped. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. But they're not going to stop asking. And Charlotte, they have resources we don't. If they decide you're a threat to national security or that this information needs to be classified, they can't classify what's already public," Daniel interrupted. "That's why we publish first, then deal with government pressure. It's not ideal, but it's the only way to maintain control." "How fast can you publish?" Dominic asked. 3 weeks if we push. We've got cooperation from major outlets, The Times, The Post, Guardian. Simultaneous release across platforms. But 3 weeks is aggressive. We'd be cutting corners on verification. "Do it," Charlotte said. Everyone looked at her. "If American intelligence is circling, if Russian agents are looking for me, we don't have time for perfect. We need to move before someone shuts us down." Katerina nodded slowly. 3 weeks then. I'll need the full data set." Charlotte pulled a second USB drive from her pocket. This one containing everything, complete financial records her father had died protecting. She hesitated before handing it over, the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. "Once this is public, there's no taking it back," Daniel said gently. "People will be angry. You'll be identified as the source eventually, no matter how hard we try to protect your identity. Your life changes permanently." It already changed, Charlotte said. The night they grabbed me, the moment my father left me that postcard. I'm just following through now. She gave Katerina the drive. They spent the next 3 weeks in a strange limbo. Charlotte maintained her cover, attended classes, worked cafe shifts, pretended everything was normal, but she lived in Dominic's penthouse, trained in his basement facility, learned the operational tradecraft that had kept her father alive for 2 decades. She got better, faster, more alert, started noticing things she'd never paid attention to before. The man who appeared on her route to campus 3 days in a row, the car that followed her bus for 6 blocks, the subtle tells that marked someone as surveillance rather than coincidence. You're not paranoid if they're actually watching, Marcus said when she reported these observations. Are they? Some of them, American intelligence probably, making sure you're not a threat. We're watching them watching you. It's very circular. Charlotte tried to focus on her thesis. Professor Martinez had granted an extension, but she still needed to produce something. She sat in Dominic's study with her laptop open, trying to care about cultural literacy and educational philosophy, but the words wouldn't come. How was she supposed to write about her father's academic legacy when she now knew that his teaching career had been cover for intelligence work? The night before publication, Dominic made dinner. Actual cooking again, not takeout. Pasta carbonara that he executed with the same precision he brought to operational planning. Tomorrow changes everything, he said, setting a plate in front of Charlotte. Katerina will publish at 6 a.m. Eastern. By noon, it'll be the biggest story in the world. By evening, you'll be identified. Are you ready? No, Charlotte said honestly, but I don't think I ever would be. Fair enough. Dominic sat across from her. After tomorrow, you'll need to decide what comes next. You can disappear. I can arrange that. New identity, relocation, witness protection if you want it. Or you can stay visible, become a public figure, use the attention as protection. Both have risks. What did my father do when he was exposed? He was never exposed. That was his genius. He stayed in the background, let other people take credit for his discoveries, stayed anonymous until the very end. Dominic paused. But you're not him. You're more like Katerina, someone who believes transparency is its own protection. So if you want to go public, own the story, I'll support that. Charlotte pushed pasta around her plate. I keep thinking about what Katerina said, that my father never remarried, never let anyone close, because the work made him a target. Is that what I'm choosing? A life where everyone's a potential threat? That's one version. Or you build a life inside this world, where the people around you understand the risks and choose to stay anyway. Dominic met her eyes. Your father kept you separate from his work because he loved you, wanted to protect you. But that protection was also isolation. Maybe there's a different way. Charlotte understood what he wasn't quite saying, that Dominic himself had built something, this operation, these people, this network of professionals who moved through dangerous spaces together, that there was community in this world if you knew where to look. What happens to you after this publishes? She asked. I keep working. This doesn't expose me. Your father was careful about that. My name appears nowhere in the documents. I stay in the shadows where I'm most useful. That sounds lonely. Sometimes. Dominic smiled slightly. Less so lately. They ate in comfortable silence. Charlotte realized she felt safer here, in this apartment with this dangerous man, than she'd felt anywhere since her father died. Maybe before that. Maybe she'd been living in false security her entire life. And this constant awareness of threat, this knowledge that danger was real and proximity was a weapon, was actually more honest. Her phone buzzed. A message from Katerina. Final checks complete. Publication proceeds as scheduled. See you on the other side. Charlotte showed it to Dominic. He nodded once. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Charlotte tried. Lay in the guest room that had become her room, staring at the ceiling, listening to Boston's nighttime sounds. Somewhere out there, Katerina and her team were finalizing articles that would reshape international politics. Somewhere out there, Russian agents were still looking for Robert Hayes' daughter. Somewhere out there, American intelligence officials were deciding whether Charlotte was an asset or a threat. And in the morning, the whole world would know her name. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to Dominic knocking on her door. Dawn light filtered through the windows. Her phone showed 5:47 a.m. It's live, Dominic said. Katerina just published. Charlotte grabbed her laptop and pulled up the New York Times homepage. The headline dominated the screen. Massive Russian corruption exposed. Stolen documents reveal decades of bribery, influence operations. Below it, a smaller headline. Source named as daughter of deceased American intelligence asset. Charlotte's photo, her faculty ID from Boston College, the one where she looked young and naive and completely unprepared for anything, stared back at her from the screen. Well, she said quietly, I guess there's no going back now. No, Dominic agreed. There's not. Charlotte's phone started ringing at 6:02 a.m. The first call came from a number she didn't recognize, a reporter from CNN, according to the voicemail. The second came 30 seconds later, then a third. By 6:15, her phone was vibrating so continuously it sounded like a dying insect. Dominic took it from her hand, powered it down, and set it on the counter. We anticipated this. Marcus is already running interference. He's got a secondary number fielding press inquiries. You don't talk to anyone until we've established protocol. Charlotte stared at her laptop screen, scrolling through the article. Katerina had done exactly what she'd promised. Meticulous detail, verified sources, corroboration from multiple experts. The financial records were displayed in infographics that made the corruption impossible to dismiss. Names jumped out at her. Senators she'd seen on television, diplomats her father had probably met at conferences, businessmen whose companies she'd heard of. And buried in the fourth paragraph, her own name. Charlotte Hayes, daughter of Robert Hayes, longtime academic and intelligence asset who acquired the documents before his death in June. They're saying he was murdered, Charlotte said, voice hollow. She pointed at a section near the end of the article. Katerina included testimony from a former Russian intelligence officer claiming my father was targeted, that his heart attack wasn't natural. Dominic leaned over her shoulder to read. His jaw tightened. She shouldn't have published that without more verification. But is it true? I don't know. I've suspected it, but I don't have proof. Your father's autopsy showed natural causes. Could someone have induced a heart attack that looked natural? Yes. Would they have? Maybe. But Charlotte, dwelling on it now, he was murdered. The certainty settled into Charlotte's bones, cold and absolute. They killed him because he had this information and they couldn't risk him delivering it. And then they came after me thinking I'd inherited his work. Which you did? Which I did. Charlotte closed the laptop before she could see her photo again. What happens now? Now we wait to see who comes for you. FBI will want to interview you. They'll frame it as protective custody, but really they want to know what else you have. CIA will be circling, trying to assess damage to their operations. And Russian intelligence, Dominic pulled out his own phone, scrolled through messages. Russian intelligence is already issuing denials, calling the documents fabricated, threatening legal action against the publications. Standard playbook, Marcus said from the doorway. Charlotte hadn't heard him enter. Deny, discredit, distract. They'll target Katerina's credibility first, then yours. Expect stories about your father being delusional or corrupt. Expect your academic work to be picked apart. They'll dig up every embarrassing detail of your life and weaponize it. Charlotte thought about her life. Boring, unremarkable, exactly the kind of existence that didn't generate scandalous material. I don't have embarrassing details. I'm a graduate student. I work at a coffee shop. My idea of excitement is finding a first edition Austen at a used bookstore. Doesn't matter. They'll invent something if they have to. Marcus crossed to the windows, checked the street below. We've got company already. Black sedan, diplomatic plates, parked across the street. 2 occupants. They're not even trying to be subtle. Dominic joined him at the window. Charlotte stayed at the counter, unable to look. The idea that people were watching the building, watching for her, made her skin crawl. FBI or CIA? Dominic asked. FBI, probably. CIA would be less obvious. Marcus turned back to Charlotte. You need to prepare for this. They'll request an interview. You'll go because refusing looks like you have something to hide. You'll bring a lawyer. You'll answer questions carefully. You'll give them nothing they don't already know from the published documents. I don't have a lawyer. You do now, Dominic said. I've retained someone. Former federal prosecutor, now does defense work for whistleblowers and intelligence cases. She's good. She'll meet you before any interview. Everything was moving too fast. Charlotte felt like she was watching her life from outside her body, seeing decisions being made about her future without her input. Except she'd made the choice that started this. She'd handed Katerina the USB drive. She'd authorized publication. This was the consequence she'd known was coming. "When will they want to talk to me?" she asked. "Today, probably. Maybe this afternoon." Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, expression darkening. "Definitely today. That's the lawyer now. FBI just contacted her requesting a meeting at their Boston field office. 4 p.m. 7 hours. Charlotte had 7 hours before she'd be sitting across from federal agents, being questioned about her dead father's intelligence work and the documents that were currently causing international incidents. "I need to shower," she said, "and coffee. A lot of coffee." She stood under scalding water for 20 minutes, trying to wash away the anxiety that had settled into her bones. When she emerged, she found clothes laid out on the bed, professional but not formal, exactly what someone would wear to meet with law enforcement. Dominic had thought of everything. She wasn't sure if that was comforting or unsettling. The lawyer arrived at 2 p.m. Her name was Rebecca Sato, and she looked exactly like someone who'd prosecuted federal cases for a decade. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, an air of competence that made Charlotte feel marginally less terrified. "First rule," Rebecca said, settling into a chair across from Charlotte. "You don't lie. Ever. Lying to federal agents is a crime. But you also don't volunteer information. Answer the question asked, nothing more. If they ask yes or no questions, give yes or no answers. Don't elaborate." "What if they ask about Dominic or Marcus or how I found the documents?" "You tell the truth. A friend of your father's helped you after you were kidnapped. You don't name names unless they ask directly. If they ask about specific individuals, you refer them to the published articles. Everything they need to know is already public." They spent 2 hours preparing. Rebecca ran through likely questions, coached Charlotte on tone and body language, explained what topics were safe and which ones required deflection. By the time they left for the FBI field office, Charlotte felt like she'd crammed for an exam where the stakes were federal prosecution instead of a bad grade. Marcus drove. Rebecca sat in backs with Charlotte, still drilling her on responses. Dominic stayed behind, which was probably strategic. His presence would raise questions they didn't want to answer. The FBI field office occupied several floors of a downtown building Charlotte had passed 100 times without really seeing. The lobby was sterile, all metal detectors and security badges, and the kind of aggressive bureaucratic efficiency that made her feel guilty despite having done nothing wrong. They were escorted to a conference room on the 8th floor. 2 agents were waiting, a man in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes, and a woman maybe 10 years younger who watched Charlotte with the intensity of someone trained to spot lies. "I'm Special Agent Morrison," the man said. "This is Special Agent Chen. Thank you for coming in, Ms. Hayes. We know this has been a difficult time." Charlotte nodded but didn't speak. Rebecca had told her to let them lead, to not fill silence with nervous chatter. "We want to talk to you about your father's work," Morrison continued, "and about the documents that were published this morning. I assume you've seen the articles?" "Yes." "Can you tell us how you acquired the materials?" "My father left me a message, instructions on where to find what he'd hidden. I followed those instructions and recovered a USB drive containing the financial records." "Where did you find this drive?" Charlotte glanced at Rebecca, who nodded slightly. "He'd left it with a bookshop owner in Cambridge, someone he trusted. The owner gave it to me when I asked about it." "And then what did you do?" "I contacted journalists my father had recommended. They verified the documents and published them." Agent Chen leaned forward. "Did you make copies of the drive? Share the contents with anyone else before giving it to the journalists?" Rebecca intervened. "My client exercised appropriate caution with sensitive materials. The specifics of her data handling aren't relevant to your investigation." "They're relevant if she shared classified information with unauthorized parties," Chen said, voice sharp. "The materials weren't classified," Rebecca countered. "They were stolen from foreign intelligence services by a private citizen. Charlotte had no security clearance and no obligation to treat them as classified." Morrison held up a hand, placating. "We're not here to charge Ms. Hayes with anything. We're trying to understand the scope of what her father acquired. The documents that were published are extensive, but we believe there may be more. Additional materials he gathered. Charlotte kept her expression neutral. I gave everything to the journalists. What you see published is what I had. It was technically true. She'd given Katerina everything that was on her father's USB drive. The fact that Charlotte had made backup copies and secured them separately, that wasn't lying, just selective disclosure. Your father worked with several intelligence agencies over his career, Morrison said. CIA primarily, but also British intelligence and others. Did he leave any indication of who else might have copies of these documents? Who else knew about his final acquisition? No. His note to me didn't mention other contacts. What about Dominic Frost? Charlotte's stomach dropped, but she kept her face still. Who? Dominic Frost runs a private security firm. Your father worked with him on at least 3 operations that we know of. We have reason to believe you've been in contact with him. Rebecca's hand touched Charlotte's arm lightly, a warning. Ms. Hayes has been in contact with several of her father's former colleagues as she's tried to make sense of his work. She's not required to provide you with a list of everyone she's spoken to. We're not asking for a list, Chen said. We're asking specifically about Frost. He's a person of interest in several ongoing investigations. If Ms. Hayes is associating with him, she needs to understand the risks. What risks? Charlotte asked, before Rebecca could stop her. Morrison and Chen exchanged a glance. Then Morrison said, Dominic Frost operates in legal gray areas. He's never been charged with anything, but he's been connected to activities that concern us. Arms dealing, unauthorized intelligence operations. We believe he may have been involved in the kidnapping that brought you into this situation. That's absurd, Charlotte said, anger overriding caution. The people who kidnapped me were criminals trying to collect my father's debt. Dominic rescued me from them. Or, Chen suggested, he orchestrated the entire thing, created a crisis that made you dependent on him. Classic intelligence technique. Manufacture a threat, then position yourself as the solution. Makes the asset grateful, compliant. Charlotte wanted to argue, to defend Dominic, but Rebecca's grip on her arm tightened. She forced herself to breathe, to think through the accusation. Was it possible? Had Dominic somehow arranged her kidnapping, knowing it would drive her into his protection? No. The men who'd taken her had been real. The warehouse had been real. The zip ties cutting into her wrists, the terror, the certainty she was going to die. None of that had been manufactured. And the boss, the man in the expensive suit who'd calmly discussed selling her if she couldn't pay, he hadn't been working for Dominic. His anger when Dominic's team raided the warehouse had been genuine, unless it was all theater, unless everyone had been playing roles. Charlotte shook her head, dislodging the paranoia. You're wrong about him. Maybe, Morrison said. Or maybe you're too close to see it clearly. Ms. Hayes, we're not your enemy here. We want to help. But we need you to be honest with us about your relationship with Frost and what other materials your father might have left behind. I've been honest. I found one USB drive. I gave it to journalists. I don't have anything else. What about your father's other work? His network of contacts, his ongoing operations, intelligence he gathered that wasn't part of the Russian corruption files. I don't know about any of that. Chen pulled out a folder, spread photographs across the table. Charlotte recognized some of them. Academic conferences, her father standing with other professors. But some showed him in different contexts. Meeting with men in suits in anonymous hotel lobbies. Sitting in outdoor cafes with people who didn't look like academics. Living the double life he'd hidden from her for decades. Your father was running multiple operations simultaneously, Chen said. Russian corruption was just one thread. We think he left you more than just that USB drive. We think he left you access to his entire intelligence network. He didn't. His note mentioned only the one set of documents. Did you read all his notes? All his correspondence? Check his computer files, his storage units, his safety deposit boxes? Charlotte hesitated. She'd cleaned out his apartment, but she'd done it while grieving, distracted, not looking for hidden intelligence. What if there were other messages she'd missed? Other postcards pinned to bulletin boards? Other instructions embedded in innocuous places? I went through his belongings after he died, she said carefully. If there was more, I didn't find it. Morrison gathered up the photographs. Okay, but Ms. Hayes, if you do find additional materials, you need to bring them to us immediately. Not to journalists, not to private contractors like Frost. To us. The FBI. We can protect you in ways they can't. Am I under investigation? No. But you're a witness in multiple ongoing cases. We need you to cooperate. I have cooperated. I came here voluntarily. I answered your questions, and we appreciate that. Morrison stood, signaling the interview was ending. If you think of anything else, if you find anything else, call us immediately. Agent Chen will give you our direct numbers. Outside, in Marcus's SUV, Charlotte let herself shake. Rebecca sat beside her, quiet until they were several blocks from the FBI building. You did well, the lawyer said. Better than most people in their first federal interview. You stayed calm, didn't volunteer information, didn't let them rattle you. They think Dominic set up my kidnapping. They're doing what investigators do. Looking for conspiracy because it's more interesting than random crime. Doesn't mean they're right. Rebecca pulled out her phone, typed something. I'll send Dominic a debrief. He'll want to know what they asked about. Charlotte stared out the window at Boston scrolling past. Normal people doing normal things while her life spiraled further into territory she didn't recognize. Do you think there's more? Other things my father left hidden? Honestly, probably. Men like Robert Hayes don't put all their secrets in one place, but whether you're meant to find them or whether they're meant to stay buried, that's the question. Back at the apartment, Dominic was waiting with takeout from somewhere expensive and wine that probably cost more than Charlotte's monthly cafe wages. He poured her a glass without asking if she wanted it. Rebecca briefed me, he said. The FBI's grasping. They want there to be more because it gives them leverage. But Charlotte, if your father left other materials, he would have given you clear instructions. The postcard message was specific. If he'd wanted you to find more, he would have said so. Unless he didn't have time, if he was murdered. Then whoever killed him likely searched for anything else he had. Your father's apartment was cleaned out by someone before you got there. I verified that months ago. Professional job? They left enough personal items that you wouldn't notice, but anything intelligence-related was gone. Charlotte set down her wine glass. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because it didn't matter. What they found, if they found anything, wasn't the Russian corruption files. Your father had hidden those too well. The other materials, whatever operational intelligence he'd accumulated, that's probably gone. Destroyed or taken by whoever killed him. The FBI thinks you orchestrated my kidnapping. Dominic's expression didn't change. I know. Chen's been trying to build a case against me for 3 years. She sees conspiracy everywhere. It's her weakness. But it's not true. No, it's not true. He met her eyes directly. Charlotte, I could lie to you. I could tell you whatever you wanted to hear, but I won't. So believe me when I say I had nothing to do with your kidnapping. I didn't know those men were going to grab you. When I found out, I mobilized my team immediately. That's the truth. Charlotte wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, because if Dominic had manufactured the threat, if he'd orchestrated everything, then she had no allies at all, just enemies wearing different masks. Okay, she said quietly. I believe you. Good. Dominic pulled out his laptop. Now we need to talk about next steps. The publication has triggered responses faster than anticipated. Russian intelligence is scrambling. American agencies are investigating. And there are other parties, private interests, foreign governments, corporate entities who are now aware you exist and might have additional information. Meaning I'm a target. Meaning you're valuable. There's a difference. Targets get eliminated. Valuable assets get acquired. He turned the laptop so she could see the screen. It showed news coverage of the leaked documents, talking heads debating implications, politicians issuing statements, financial markets reacting to the revelation of corruption. You're famous now. That's both protection and danger. People can't disappear you quietly anymore, but they can still hurt you in other ways. Marcus entered carrying 2 phones. Press requests are at 400 and climbing. Everyone wants an interview. I've been declining, but you need to make a decision about visibility. Do you want to give a statement, control the narrative? Charlotte hadn't thought about this. She'd imagined the documents speaking for themselves, her name being a footnote in someone else's investigation. But apparently she was the story now. What do you think? She asked Dominic. I think you should stay silent for now. Let the documents be the focus. Don't give them your voice to pick apart and misquote. But, he paused, that's what I would do. You might feel differently. Charlotte thought about Katerina. about the way the journalist had stood by her work despite 6 months in a Polish prison, about her father, who'd spent decades in silence, letting others take credit while he stayed anonymous. Two different approaches, two different philosophies about how to survive in this world. I want to give one interview, she said, just one, to someone who'll let me tell the story properly. Then I go quiet. Dominic nodded slowly. I can arrange that. I know someone at 60 Minutes, serious journalist, won't sensationalize. But Charlotte, once you do this, you're all in. No going back to anonymity. I know. The interview was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, Charlotte lived in a strange, suspended state. She couldn't go back to campus. Reporters had staked out Boston College, waiting to ambush her between classes. She couldn't work at the cafe. Too public, too vulnerable. She was trapped in Dominic's penthouse, watching her life become a news story she had no control over. Her thesis advisor called. Professor Martinez's voice was carefully neutral. Charlotte, the department has asked me to reach out. Given the circumstances, we think it might be best if you took a leave of absence, just temporarily, until things settle down. You're kicking me out of the program. We're suggesting a pause. The media attention is disruptive. Other students are being approached by reporters. Faculty are being questioned about your father. It's become a distraction. So I'm being punished for exposing corruption. You're being given space to deal with a difficult situation. Martinez sighed. Charlotte, I'm not your enemy. I'm trying to protect you in the program. Take the semester off. Let this blow over. Come back when you're ready. After she hung up, Charlotte sat staring at her phone. Her academic career, the thing she'd been building toward, the path she'd chosen to honor her father's memory, was evaporating. The thesis about his educational legacy that she'd never be able to write honestly now that she knew what his real work had been. They're scared, Dominic said. He'd been working at the dining table pretending not to listen. Institutions always are when something disrupts their comfort. Give it time. Once the immediate controversy fades, they'll let you back. And if they don't, then you do something else. Charlotte, you're 23. Your path isn't set in stone. This crisis, it's opened doors even while closing others. You just have to decide which ones you want to walk through. That night, Charlotte couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her bed now, not the guest room. She'd been here long enough that possessives had shifted, and thought about choices. The choice to give Katerina the USB drive, the choice to do the FBI interview, the choice to stay here with Dominic instead of running, hiding, disappearing into witness protection. Each choice narrowed her options. Each one took her further from the life she'd imagined and deeper into the world her father had inhabited. The world of secrets and surveillance, where nothing was quite what it seemed and trust was a calculated risk. She got up, pulled on a robe, and found Dominic still awake in the living room. He was reading something on his laptop, expression focused in the way that meant he was working through a problem. Can't sleep? He asked without looking up. Keep thinking about what comes next. After the interview, after the immediate crisis. What does my life look like? Dominic closed the laptop, gave her his full attention. That's your decision, but I can tell you what I see. I see someone who's intelligent, capable of handling pressure, quick to learn operational tradecraft, someone who's proven she can keep her head in bad situations. That's valuable. You're offering me a job. I'm saying you have options. You could work with me. Intelligence analysis, asset management, security consulting. Or you could go back to academia when they let you, pretend this was a temporary deviation. Or you could do something entirely different. Write a book about your experience. Become an advocate for whistleblowers. Whatever you want. Charlotte sat down on the couch. What did my father want? When he left me that postcard, when he gave me the choice to find the information or walk away, what did he think I'd do? He thought you'd do exactly what you did. Find it, verify it, release it. He knew you too well to think you'd choose silence. Dominic's voice softened, but I don't think he anticipated the cost. He died thinking his death would bury the secret. He didn't expect you to have to navigate the aftermath. Do you think he'd be proud or angry that I didn't walk away? Both, probably. Parents are complicated that way. Charlotte pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. The view outside the floor-to-ceiling windows showed Boston at 3 a.m. Lights scattered across the darkness. The city that had been her home but felt alien now. everything familiar rendered foreign by what she'd learned, what she'd done, who she was becoming. "I'm angry at him," she admitted, "for leaving me this, for not trusting me with the truth while he was alive, for making me figure it all out after he was gone. You're entitled to that anger, but I also understand why he did it. He was trying to protect me, keep me separate from the danger. It just didn't work." "It never does," Dominic said. "Protection through ignorance only lasts until the ignorance breaks. Then you're more vulnerable than if you'd known all along." They sat in silence for a while. Charlotte felt exhausted but too wired to sleep, her mind spinning through implications and consequences. Finally, she said, "The FBI thinks there's more. Other things my father hid." "Probably. Should I look for them?" Dominic considered this. "That depends. Are you looking because you want to complete his work? Or because you feel obligated? Because obligation is a terrible reason to keep digging into things that could get you killed." "I want to know who killed him, if someone did. I want proof." "That's a dangerous want. Proof of murder means confronting murderers. Charlotte, sometimes the better choice is to let the dead keep their secrets." "Is that what you do?" "No," Dominic admitted. "I'd dig until I found the truth, but I'm not a good example of healthy decision-making." Charlotte smiled despite herself. "Neither am I, apparently." She went back to bed eventually, managed a few hours of restless sleep before dawn. When she woke, the apartment was quiet. She found a note from Dominic on the kitchen counter. "Had to handle something. Marcus is on security. Make yourself at home." D. Charlotte made coffee and sat at the dining table with her father's letter, the one that had been in the envelope with the USB drive. She'd read it 100 times, but she read it again now, looking for clues she'd missed. The final paragraph stuck out this time. "If you want to pursue this, I've included contact information for 3 people who can help. Journalists, investigators, people I trust." 3 people. She'd contacted all 3, but what if there were others? People her father trusted but hadn't named explicitly because he didn't want to put them at risk? Charlotte pulled out her laptop and opened a file she'd been avoiding. Her father's complete contact list, recovered from his university email account. Hundreds of names, colleagues, students, conference organizers, most meaningless. But buried in there, maybe, were the people who'd really mattered, the ones who'd known what Robert Hayes actually did. She started searching methodically, cross-referencing names with known intelligence personnel, looking for patterns in his correspondence. It was tedious work, exactly the kind of archival research she'd been trained to do in graduate school, finding needles in haystacks, identifying significance in what looked like noise. 3 hours later, she found something. An email exchange from 2 years ago, flagged because her father had used a phrase that appeared nowhere else in his correspondence. Victorian complications. He'd written it to someone named James Garrett, apparently an old friend from his graduate school days. The email itself was mundane, discussing a conference panel about 19th century poetry. But the phrase stood out. Charlotte searched for other instances of Victorian complications and found 2 more. One in a different email to Garrett. One in an email to himself, sent from his university account to a personal address she didn't recognize. She opened a new search window and looked up James Garrett. Multiple results, but one caught her attention. Former CIA analyst, now retired, living in Maine. Published several books about intelligence history. This was someone her father had worked with. Had to be. The phrase was code. Had to be code. A way of signaling something that looked innocent to anyone casually reading his emails. Charlotte was still staring at her screen when the apartment door opened. Dominic entered looking tense, Marcus behind him with an expression that meant something had gone wrong. "We have a problem," Dominic said without preamble. "Someone just tried to access your father's storage unit, the one he rented under a false name in Watertown." Charlotte's stomach dropped. "I didn't know he had a storage unit." "Neither did anyone else. I only found out because I have alerts on property records. He'd listed an LLC I knew he controlled. Someone just attempted to cut the lock. Failed because we'd upgraded security after I discovered it. But they tried." "Who?" "Don't know yet. Could be FBI. Could be Russian intelligence. Could be someone else entirely." Dominic set his phone on the table. "Question is, do we get there first and see what he was storing? Or do we let it go, assume whatever's there is too dangerous to touch?" Charlotte looked at the email about Victorian complications still open on her laptop. then at Dominic's tense expression, then at Marcus, who was checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. "We go," she said. "We find out what he left. We finish this." Dominic smiled, sharp, almost predatory. "I was hoping you'd say that." They took 2 vehicles, Marcus driving the SUV with Charlotte, Dominic following in a separate car with 2 other security personnel Charlotte recognized from the warehouse rescue. The storage facility in Watertown was the kind of place that advertised climate-controlled units and 24-hour access, but really just meant rows of concrete boxes secured with padlocks that anyone with bolt cutters could defeat. "Your father rented it under the name Thomas Wheeler," Dominic explained over the phone, his voice coming through the SUV's speakers. "Paid cash annually. The LLC he used traces back to a shell company in Delaware. Very careful. Very deliberate." Charlotte stared out the window at Watertown sliding past. "How did you even find this?" "After I learned about the Russian documents, I started digging into everything your father owned or controlled. Took months, but I mapped his entire financial footprint. This storage unit was the last thing I uncovered. I've been monitoring it, but hadn't accessed it. Figured if he wanted it found, he would have left you specific instructions. And now someone else is looking for it. Which means either they know something we don't, or they're working through the same process I did, checking every property connected to your father." Marcus took a corner too fast. Charlotte grabbed his handle above her door. "Easy," she said. "Getting there in one piece would be nice." "We're being followed," Marcus replied, eyes on the rearview mirror. "Black sedan, 2 cars back. Could be FBI surveillance or something worse." Charlotte twisted to look. The sedan was there, maintaining careful distance. "Should we abort?" "No," Dominic said through the phone. "If they're watching, they already know where we're going. Aborting just delays the inevitable. We get there, we get in and out fast, we deal with whoever shows up." The storage facility appeared on their left, a squat building surrounded by chain-link fence, units arranged in long corridors like prison cells. Marcus pulled into the parking lot. Dominic's car followed seconds later. "Unit 247, Dominic said, exiting his vehicle. He was carrying a duffel bag that Charlotte suspected contained more than just tools for opening locks. "Second floor, east wing. Marcus, you stay with Charlotte. The rest of you secure the perimeter." They moved as a unit, practiced, efficient, the kind of coordination that came from working together repeatedly. Charlotte felt like a civilian caught in a military operation, which she supposed she was. Her role here was to identify what mattered among her father's possessions, not to provide tactical support. The second floor corridor smelled like concrete dust and motor oil. Unit 247 had a heavy-duty padlock that looked new. Dominic examined it briefly, then produced keys from his pocket. "You already had access?" Charlotte asked. "I had copies made, just in case." The lock clicked open. Dominic pulled the door up, metal scraping against metal, revealing darkness beyond. He clicked on a flashlight. The beam swept across the interior, illuminating stacked boxes, furniture covered in drop cloths, the accumulated debris of a hidden life. Charlotte stepped inside, Marcus close behind her. "What are we looking for?" she asked. "Anything that explains why your father kept this place secret. Anything that might tell us who killed him." Dominic started pulling covers off furniture. Underneath, a desk, filing cabinets, a small safe bolted to the floor. Charlotte moved to the boxes, started opening them systematically. The first contained books, academic texts, nothing remarkable. The second held files, organized with the same meticulous care her father had brought to his university work. She pulled one out randomly, skimmed the contents. Notes from a conference in Prague, correspondence with other academics. The third box made her stop. Photographs. Dozens of them, organized in labeled envelopes. Each envelope marked with a date and location. Charlotte pulled out the one marked Istanbul, March 2018, and spread the photos across the desk. Her father with various people, some in academic settings, some in cafes or parks. Surveillance photos, essentially. Documentation of meetings that shouldn't have been documented. "He kept records," she said, voice hollow, "of everyone he met, everyone he worked with." Dominic joined her, examining the photographs. His expression darkened. "This is insurance. If anyone ever came after him, he could threaten to expose them, mutually assured destruction. Or," Marcus said from near the door, Someone found out about these and decided he was too dangerous to keep alive. Charlotte kept pulling out envelopes: Berlin, London, Moscow, Tokyo. Her father had traveled more than she'd realized, always under the guise of academic conferences, always building his network, documenting connections, creating leverage. And in the envelope marked Boston, April 2024, 2 months before he died, she found photographs that made her breath catch. Her father meeting with a man in an expensive suit, the same man who'd orchestrated her kidnapping. The boss, sitting across from Robert Hayes in what looked like a hotel lobby, both of them looking serious but not hostile. "They knew each other," Charlotte whispered. "My father and the man who took me. They'd met before." Dominic took the photo, studied it intently. "When did your father borrow the money? The $350,000? 5 years ago, you said. And when did he have his heart attack?" 4 months ago, June. 2 months after this photo. Dominic's jaw tightened. "Charlotte, I don't think your father owed them money. I think he was paying them for something. Protection, maybe. Or access to networks. And something went wrong." Charlotte's mind raced through implications. If her father hadn't been a debtor but a client, if the kidnapping hadn't been about collecting debt but about retrieving something else. "They thought I had whatever he'd purchased," she said. "Not money to pay them back. Information, access, something he'd bought from them." Which means the Russian documents weren't the only thing he acquired. There's more. Dominic moved to the filing cabinets, started pulling drawers. "Your father was running multiple operations. The corruption files were just the most valuable. But he had other intelligence, other sources. That's what these people are looking for." Charlotte heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy, multiple people moving fast. Marcus's hand went to his weapon, but Dominic held up a hand, stopping him. "Don't. If it's FBI, shooting federal agents ends badly for everyone. We wait. See who it is." 5 men entered the storage unit. Charlotte recognized 2 of them immediately. FBI agents Morrison and Chen. The other 3 were unfamiliar, dressed in tactical gear without insignia. "Ms. Hayes," Morrison said, voice carefully neutral. "Interesting timing. We had this location under surveillance, and here you are." "My father rented this unit," Charlotte said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have a right to access his property." "Property rented under a false identity and paid for through shell corporations. That's not a right. That's evidence of criminal activity." Chen moved past Morrison, eyeing the photographs spread across the desk. "What did you find?" "Nothing illegal. Personal effects, academic materials." "Photographs of intelligence personnel aren't personal effects." Chen picked up the photo of Charlotte's father with the boss. "This man is Dmitry Volkov, Russian organized crime with intelligence connections. Your father was meeting with him 2 months before his death. Care to explain that?" Charlotte glanced at Dominic, who gave the slightest shake of his head. "Don't volunteer information." "I don't know anything about that meeting," she said. "I'm here trying to understand my father's life, same as you." "Except we have warrants and legal authority," Morrison said. "You have Dominic Frost and a gun. Very different situations." One of the men in tactical gear stepped forward. Unlike the others, he spoke with a Russian accent. "The photographs. Where are the rest?" Morrison turned sharply. "Excuse me?" "You hired us to track the daughter," the Russian continued, ignoring Morrison's glare, "to find what the father left. You don't get to keep the intelligence for yourself. My employers paid for access." Charlotte watched Morrison's face cycle through shock and anger. The FBI agent hadn't been working alone. He'd brought in outside help, Russian outside help apparently, and now that arrangement was falling apart in real time. "Stand down," Morrison said through gritted teeth. "That's an order." "You don't give me orders." The Russian pulled a weapon. "Not FBI issue, something heavier. The girl comes with us, the photographs too. You get your federal investigation. We get what we paid for." Everything happened too fast. Marcus moved first, tackling Charlotte behind the desk as gunfire erupted. Dominic's team returned fire from the doorway. Morrison was shouting something about federal agents, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Charlotte pressed herself against the floor, hands over her head, while bullets tore through boxes and ricocheted off metal. She heard someone scream, one of the Russians, hit. Heard Morrison yelling into a radio, calling for backup. Then silence, broken only by ragged breathing and the ringing in Charlotte's ears. Marcus pulled her up carefully, checking her for injuries. You hit? No, I'm okay. Charlotte's voice shook despite her best efforts to steady it. Two of the Russians were down. The third had fled. Morrison and Chen stood with hands raised, Dominic's team covering them with weapons. The entire situation had collapsed into something no one could control. Lower your weapons, Morrison said, trying to reclaim authority. You just fired on federal agents. Your people fired first, Dominic interrupted coldly. And you're working with Russian intelligence. That's treason, Morrison. How much did they pay you to compromise this investigation? I was trying to protect. You were trying to profit. Don't insult us with patriotic justifications. Dominic pulled out his phone, made a call. Yeah, storage unit in Watertown, FBI agents compromised. Send the team and contact whoever you have at DOJ. We need this contained. Charlotte slowly stood, legs shaking. The storage unit looked like a war zone. Boxes destroyed, papers scattered, bullet holes in the walls. Her father's carefully organized insurance policy lay in ruins around her. But the safe was still bolted to the floor, untouched. She moved toward it while the men argued about jurisdiction and backup and who was going to be charged with what crimes. The safe had a digital keypad. Charlotte stared at it, trying to think like her father. What would he use as a code? Her birthday. It had to be her birthday. That's what parents did. Use their children's birthdays for passwords because they'd never forget them. She typed in August 15th, 2002. The safe beeped negative, tried her mother's birthday. Wrong again. Then, on impulse, she tried the date her father had pinned the postcard to the cafe bulletin board. She didn't know the exact date, but she tried April 1st, April Fool's Day, which would appeal to her father's sense of irony. April 1st, 2024. The safe clicked open. Inside, a single envelope sealed, her name written on the front in her father's handwriting. Charlotte pulled it out with trembling hands. Charlotte, Dominic said quietly, we need to leave. Now. More people are coming, and we don't know whose side they're on. She clutched the envelope. We take everything. All of it. The photographs, the files, everything. Can't carry it all. Then we burn what we can't take. My father kept this for a reason. We don't leave it for whoever shows up next. Marcus was already moving, pulling files from cabinets, stuffing them into bags. One of Dominic's other men produced a small incendiary device, the kind that burned hot and fast, destroying evidence efficiently. You can't destroy federal evidence, Chen protested, but her voice was weak. She knew she'd lost any moral high ground when she'd worked with compromised Russians. Watch us, Dominic said. They had maybe 3 minutes. Charlotte grabbed everything she could reach, photographs, files, her father's laptop hidden in a desk drawer, stuffed it all into bags while Marcus set the incendiary device with a timer. 60 seconds once activated. Morrison made one last attempt to stop them. You're making this worse. Let us handle. You had your chance to handle it, Charlotte said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. You failed. You sold out to foreign intelligence. You don't get to lecture me about doing things right. They ran, down the corridor, down the stairs, into the vehicles, while behind them smoke started pouring from Unit 247. The incendiary device worked exactly as designed, hot enough to destroy paper, electronic media, anything that held information. By the time fire trucks arrived, there'd be nothing left but ash. Marcus drove fast, taking side streets, checking mirrors compulsively. Charlotte sat in back with the bags of her father's materials, clutching the envelope from the safe like it might disappear if she loosened her grip. Open it, Dominic said from his car, still on speaker. Read what he wrote. We need to know what we're dealing with. Charlotte broke the seal. Inside, 3 pages in her father's handwriting. Not typed this time, written by hand the way he used to write her birthday cards. Personal, final. Charlie, it began. If you're reading this, several things have happened. You found the Russian documents. You published them. And now you're looking for answers about how I died. The fact that you've come this far means I was right about you. You're braver than I ever was, stronger. I'm sorry I put you in this position, but I'm not sorry you're the one handling it. No one else would do it right. Dmitry Volkov killed me, not directly. He's too smart for that. He had someone tamper with my medication, induce the heart attack that looked natural. He did it because I'd outlived my usefulness. I'd acquired the Russian corruption files, but I refused to give them to him, refused to let him use them for his own purposes. So he eliminated me. But here's what he doesn't know. I recorded every meeting we ever had, audio files stored on an encrypted server under the name James Garrett, the email contact you've probably found by now. Access code is your mother's maiden name plus the year we married. Inside, you'll find 3 years of conversations with Dmitri, including him admitting to various murders, including ordering mine. This is your weapon, Charlie. Use it carefully. Dmitri has protection at high levels, FBI, CIA, probably others. He's been paying people off for years. But if you release these recordings to the right people, if you do it publicly enough that he can't bury it, he'll fall, and the people protecting him will fall with him. I know what I'm asking. I know this puts you at risk. If I could have finished this myself, I would have. But I ran out of time. So I'm trusting you to do what I couldn't, expose the truth completely, not just the Russian corruption, all of it, the whole rotten system. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry. Dad. Charlotte read it twice, then handed it to Marcus so he could read while driving. Her hands felt numb. Her father had known. He'd known Dmitri was going to kill him, and he'd prepared for it anyway. Left evidence, left instructions. Turned his own murder into a weapon she could wield. Where's this encrypted server? Dominic asked. He mentions a name, James Garrett. I found emails earlier using that name, former CIA analyst in Maine. Charlotte pulled out her phone, searched for the emails, found the personal address her father had sent messages to. Access code is my mother's maiden name and their wedding year. That would be Sullivan, 1994. Send me the email address. I'll have someone access the server remotely, pull the files. No, Charlotte's voice was sharp. We do this my way. We go to Maine. We meet James Garrett in person. We make sure we know who we're dealing with before we hand over access to evidence of a federal murder conspiracy. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, we do it your way. But Charlotte, once we have those recordings, once we know what's on them, we move fast. Every hour we sit on that evidence is another hour Dmitri has to find us and silence us permanently. I understand. They drove back to the apartment in tense silence. Charlotte kept rereading her father's letter, memorizing the words. He'd known he was going to die. Had known and had chosen to set this trap anyway. Had chosen to make his daughter the executioner of his murderer. She should have been angry. Should have resented being turned into a weapon. But instead she felt something else. Purpose, maybe. Or completion. Her father had started something he couldn't finish. Now it was hers to complete. At the apartment, Dominic made calls while Charlotte spread her father's recovered materials across the dining table. More photographs. More documentation. An entire shadow archive of 20 years of intelligence work. Compromised agents, secret meetings, deals made in darkness. And woven through it all, Dmitri Volkov. Meeting with senators, with business leaders, with intelligence personnel. Always in the background, always connecting pieces that shouldn't connect. Her father had been documenting this man for years, building a case even while working with him. I've got someone tracking down James Garrett, Dominic announced. Former CIA, retired 5 years ago. Lives alone in a cabin outside Portland. He's been off the grid mostly, but he still has security clearances. Still has contacts. When can we go? Tomorrow morning. I want daylight for this. Want to see who might be following us. Dominic sat down across from her. Charlotte, are you sure about this? Once we access those audio files, once we have proof of a federal murder conspiracy, there's no walking away. You become the person who brought down FBI corruption, Russian intelligence assets, maybe entire networks. That's not a small thing. My father trusted me with it. Your father's dead. You're not. I need to know you're thinking about your own survival here, not just completing his mission. Charlotte met his eyes directly. I'm thinking about both. Dmitri Volkov ordered my kidnapping, ordered my father's murder. He's the reason my life fell apart. I want him destroyed, not because my father asked me to, because I want it. Dominic nodded slowly. Okay then, we destroy him. They left for Maine at dawn. Marcus drove again, Dominic riding shotgun, Charlotte in back with her father's letter and her own racing thoughts. The drive took 3 hours, Boston falling away to suburbs to rural Maine, trees pressing close to the highway. James Garrett's cabin sat at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by forest thick enough to hide anything. Smoke rose from the chimney despite the mild weather. Someone was home. Marcus parked 50 yards back. Let me go first. Make sure it's safe.
No, Charlotte said. I'd go. He knew my father. He's expecting me, probably. You two would just make him nervous. Dominic looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Take a radio. Stay in voice contact. First sign of trouble, you run. Charlotte clipped the small radio to her belt and walked up the path alone. The cabin looked like something from a postcard. Wood logs, stone chimney, windows reflecting forest light. She knocked on the door and waited. The man who answered was maybe 65. White hair, weathered face, eyes that assessed her with professional thoroughness before he spoke. Charlotte Hayes, he said. You look like your mother. Robert showed me pictures. Are you James Garrett? I am. Come in. We need to talk quickly. You were followed. Charlotte's heart jumped. Followed by who? Federal agents. They're setting up positions in the woods now. We have maybe 10 minutes before they move in. Garrett stepped aside, letting her enter. The cabin's interior was sparse, military neat, everything in its place. Your father left files on my server, audio recordings. You need the access codes? Yes, but if we're being raided, then we get them now before they seize my equipment. Garrett moved to a laptop on a desk near the window. The codes? Charlotte gave him her mother's maiden name and the wedding year. Garrett typed rapidly, navigating through layers of encryption. The screen filled with file names, dates, locations, runtime stamps, hundreds of recordings. Your father was thorough, Garrett said. He recorded everyone, not just Dimitri, FBI handlers, CIA contacts, other assets. This is his entire network, exposed. If this goes public, it burns down 20 years of American intelligence operations. That's the point. Is it? Garrett looked at her sharply. Or is the point to get justice for his murder? Because those are different goals with different consequences. Charlotte's radio crackled. Marcus's voice. We've got company. Multiple vehicles approaching. We need to extract now. Copy, Charlotte said into the radio. Then to Garrett. Can you upload these files somewhere remote, somewhere I can access them after we leave? Already doing it. Garrett's fingers flew across the keyboard. I'll push everything to a cloud server. Give you the access information. But Charlotte, think carefully about what you release. Some of these recordings expose people who are doing legitimate work trying to keep Americans safe. They don't deserve to be burned because your father documented them. And Dimitri? What about him? Those recordings I'd publish immediately. He's admitted to multiple murders, including your father's. That's prosecution-level evidence. The upload bar on Garrett's screen hit 100%. Done. Here's the access information. He scribbled on a piece of paper, handed it to her. Footsteps on the porch. Loud voices. FBI, we have a warrant. Garrett moved to a closet, pulled out a shotgun. Back door, go now. Charlotte ran, through the small kitchen, out the back door, into the forest. Behind her, she heard shouting, Garrett telling the agents he was cooperating, buying her time. She crashed through underbrush, radio clutched in one hand, paper with access codes in the other. Marcus appeared beside her, seemingly from nowhere. This way. Vehicles staged on the access road. They ran together. Charlotte's lungs burned. Branches tore at her clothes. Behind them, more shouting. Agents discovering she'd fled, starting pursuit. Dominic's SUV was idling where Marcus had promised. Charlotte threw herself into the back seat. Marcus jumped in front. They were moving before the doors fully closed. Did you get it? Dominic asked, driving fast on the dirt road. Yes, Garrett uploaded everything. I have the access codes. Then we finish this. Today. Now. Before they can stop us. They drove to a hotel in Portland, checked in under false names, set up in a room with 2 laptops and enough coffee to fuel a small army. Charlotte pulled up the server access Garrett had given her, navigated to the folder marked Volkov_Dimitri, 37 audio files. The first was dated 5 years ago, right when her father had supposedly borrowed money from Dimitri's organization. Charlotte clicked play. Her father's voice filled the room, younger sounding than she remembered. I need capital, $350,000. I can offer intelligence in return, operational details about CIA activities in Eastern Europe. Dimitri's voice, heavily accented. That is interesting, but I have other sources for such information. What else can you offer? I can offer myself, as an asset inside American intelligence networks.
A source you can task with specific information gathering. You're proposing to become a double agent. I'm proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement. You need intelligence. I need money. We both get what we want. Charlotte stopped the recording. Her hands were shaking. He wasn't buying information from Dmitri. He was selling himself, selling out to Russian intelligence. Keep listening, Dominic said quietly. There's more. She forced herself to play the next recording. This one was dated 6 months later. Her father's voice. I've gathered the information you requested. CIA, operations in Ukraine, asset lists, planned interventions. All of it documented. Dmitri. And the quality? Deliberately corrupted. Every file I've given you contains accurate intelligence mixed with disinformation. I've been feeding your organization garbage while documenting your requests for actual American intelligence. You've been compromising yourself while thinking you were compromising me. Silence on the recording. Then Dmitri, voice dangerous. You're playing a game you cannot win. I've already won. Everything you've asked for, everything you've admitted to in our conversations, I've recorded it all. If anything happens to me, it goes public, including evidence that you've been running corruption operations inside the FBI. We both have leverage then. We do. Which means we both stay quiet. Mutually assured destruction, Dmitri. You taught me that concept. The recording ended. Charlotte looked at Dominic, who was smiling slightly. Your father wasn't a traitor, he said. He was running a sting operation, using himself as bait to get Dmitri on record admitting to everything. But then why did Dmitri kill him? Let's find out. Dominic clicked on the final recording, dated 2 weeks before her father's death. Her father's voice, tired now. I'm done, Dmitri. I have enough. Enough to put you away. Enough to expose your FBI contacts. Enough to dismantle your entire American operation. I'm going public in 30 days. Dmitri. You won't. You have too much to lose. I'm dying anyway. Heart condition, my doctor says. 6 months, maybe a year. I don't plan to spend it protecting you. Then I suppose I will have to accelerate your timeline. You threaten me, you trigger the dead man's switch. Everything I've recorded gets released automatically. Unless I find it first. Unless I search every property you own, every person you trust. You're not the only one who can play this game, Robert. You'll never find it. I've been too careful. Perhaps. Or perhaps your daughter will find it for me. After you're gone and she's trying to understand who you really were. Young people are so predictable that way. The recording ended there. Charlotte felt cold. Dmitri had planned this from the beginning. Kill her father. Wait for her to find the evidence. Then take it from her along with her life. He knew I'd come looking, she whispered. He was counting on it. Which means he's still looking, Dominic said. Still waiting to see what you'll do with the recordings. Charlotte, we need to release these immediately, before he finds us. She thought about Katerina, about the journalist who'd published the Russian corruption files, about going public being protection because you couldn't disappear someone who was already famous, about sunlight being the best disinfectant. Not just release, Charlotte said slowly, controlled detonation. We give it to every major outlet simultaneously. We include the recordings plus my father's documentation of FBI corruption. We make it so big, so explosive, that Dmitri can't kill everyone involved, can't bury it. That'll burn your father's entire network. Everyone he documented goes down. Good. They should. Anyone working with Dmitri Volkov, anyone taking his money, anyone helping him operate inside American intelligence, they all deserve exposure. Charlotte pulled up Katerina's contact information. How fast can you set up a press conference? Boston, tonight, if I pull every favor I have. Do it. The next 6 hours were chaos. Dominic coordinated with journalists, venues, security. Marcus ran interference with FBI agents who were trying to locate them. Charlotte worked with Katerina remotely, selecting which recordings to release first, crafting the narrative. By 6 p.m., they were in a conference room at a downtown Boston hotel, facing 30 reporters and twice as many cameras. Charlotte sat at a table with Katerina on one side, Dominic's lawyer, Rebecca Sato, on the other. The room felt too bright, too exposed. Katerina spoke first, providing context. The Russian corruption documents, Robert Hayes' intelligence work, the evidence of his murder. Then she turned it over to Charlotte. My father was killed by Dmitri Volkov, Charlotte said, voice steady despite her racing heart. Murdered because he'd gathered evidence of massive corruption inside American law enforcement and intelligence services. Evidence that proves the FBI has been compromised by Russian organized crime for years. Evidence that I'm releasing in full today. She played excerpts from the recordings. Dmitry admitting to murders, FBI agents discussing payments, CIA personnel acknowledging they'd turned a blind eye to corruption because it served operational purposes. 30 minutes of devastating audio that reduced the room to stunned silence. All of these recordings, plus my father's supporting documentation, are being uploaded to public servers as I speak, Charlotte continued. They'll be available to anyone who wants to verify them. The full archive includes over 100 hours of conversation spanning 3 years. This is everything. No redactions, no protection for people who don't deserve it. The question started immediately. Reporters shouting over each other, demanding clarification, asking for details Charlotte couldn't or wouldn't provide. Rebecca fielded most of them, lawyers' training kicking in. Katerina handled technical questions about verification. Charlotte just sat there, watching her father's legacy destroy itself and take Dmitry Volkov down with it. The press conference ended at 8 p.m. By 9, the recordings were the top story on every news outlet. By 10, FBI director was giving a statement promising investigations. By 11, Dmitry Volkov had been arrested at his home in Brighton, taken into custody on multiple murder charges. Charlotte watched the arrest footage on Dominic's laptop, sitting in his apartment while Marcus stood guard and Rebecca fielded phone calls from prosecutors who wanted her cooperation. Dmitry looked smaller on screen than he had in the warehouse. Older, almost pathetic as federal agents led him away in handcuffs. "It's done," Dominic said quietly. "You got him. Your father's been avenged." Charlotte nodded, but didn't feel the satisfaction she'd expected. Just exhaustion. Just the hollow awareness that destroying Dmitry didn't bring her father back, didn't undo the kidnapping, didn't restore the normal life she'd lost. "What happens now?" she asked. "Legal proceedings, trials. You'll testify, probably multiple times. FBI will be in chaos for months, internal investigations, reforms, people losing jobs. Some of the exposed agents will go to prison. Others will just disappear quietly. Russian intelligence will scramble to protect operations that haven't been compromised yet." Dominic closed the laptop. "And you'll be famous. Permanent whistleblower status. The woman who brought down FBI corruption. I didn't want fame. No one does. But it's yours now. Question is what you do with it." Charlotte thought about her abandoned thesis, her leave of absence from graduate school, her apartment she hadn't lived in for weeks, her old life waiting across the city, theoretically available if she wanted to reclaim it. But she didn't. That person, the barista who cleaned espresso machines and worried about thesis proposals, had died in the warehouse. Or maybe before that. Maybe the moment her father's heart stopped and left her his legacy. "I want to work with you," she said. "Learn what my father knew. Do what he did, but better, smarter. I want to be useful." Dominic smiled. "You're already useful. But yes, I can train you properly, teach you everything I know. It'll take years, it'll be dangerous. You'll make enemies and lose sleep and wonder if you made the right choice." Sounds familiar. It should. It's the life your father lived, just with better backup and less secrecy. Dominic stood, offered his hand. "Welcome to the world, Charlotte Hayes. Try not to get killed." She shook his hand. The grip was firm, professional, the kind of handshake that sealed agreements and changed trajectories. 3 months later, Charlotte stood in a different conference room with very different purposes. This one was in Washington, D.C., windowless and secure, facing congressional investigators who wanted to understand how American intelligence had been compromised so thoroughly. She'd testified for 6 hours already, walking them through her father's operation, the recordings, the web of corruption he'd documented. The representatives asked careful questions, took meticulous notes, and probably accomplished nothing substantive. But the theater of it mattered. Public accountability, however performative, was still accountability. When she finally left the building, Marcus was waiting with the SUV. Dominic sat in back, working on his laptop as always. "How'd it go?" he asked without looking up. "Like talking to a wall. They'll issue a report in 6 months that blames systemic failures and recommends reforms that never get implemented." Accurate assessment. Dominic closed the laptop. On the other hand, 12 FBI agents have been indicted. Dimitri's awaiting trial. 3 senators have resigned. I'd call that a win. Charlotte settled into the seat. She'd been living in D.C. for the past month, coordinating with investigators, providing testimony, slowly becoming the public face of intelligence reform, whether she wanted to or not. Dominic had set her up with an apartment, nicer than anything she could have afforded as a graduate student, complete with security that made her feel like a prisoner and a target simultaneously. But she'd also started working, real work, not just testifying. Dominic had brought her into his organization, started teaching her analysis, asset management, operational planning. She was learning the craft her father had practiced for decades, but with mentorship instead of isolation, with a team instead of secrecy. I heard from Becca, Charlotte said. She's moving to California. Got into a creative writing program at UCLA. You told her the truth yet? Some of it. Enough that she understands why I couldn't come back to the apartment. Why I'm doing this instead of finishing my degree. She take it well? Better than expected. I think she knew I was lying all along, just gave me space to tell the truth when I was ready. They drove to the apartment in comfortable silence. Charlotte had learned to appreciate these quiet moments, brief respites between testimonies and investigations, and the constant awareness of being watched. The FBI had assigned protective detail that she'd declined. Marcus was better. Inside, Charlotte made coffee while Dominic reviewed reports from his network. Intelligence never stopped flowing, sources reporting, assets checking in, threats emerging and resolving in the constant churn of shadow work. I've got something for you, Dominic said, pulling out a folder. Case file. Missing person in Seattle. Woman disappeared after threatening to expose corporate corruption. Local police aren't interested. Family hired us to investigate. Charlotte took the folder, started reading. Jennifer Walsh, 34, accountant who'd discovered her employer was laundering money. Went to the media. Vanished 3 days later. You want me to work this? I want you to lead it. Marcus goes with you for security. You coordinate the investigation, manage local assets, find out what happened to her. Standard missing persons case with intelligence complications.
Charlotte felt something shift inside her, nervous excitement mixed with purpose. This was real work, not testimony or documentation, actual field operations, the kind her father had done. When do I leave? Tomorrow morning. You'll have full support, local contacts, surveillance resources, operational funds. This is your case, Charlotte. Prove you can handle it. She spent that evening preparing, memorizing case details, reviewing protocols, practicing the kind of analytical thinking that Dominic had been drilling into her. By the time she went to bed, she felt ready. Scared, but ready. The Seattle case took 3 weeks to resolve. Charlotte found Jennifer Walsh alive, being held by corporate security contractors who'd been paid to keep her quiet. She coordinated the extraction with local law enforcement, ensured Walsh's safety, and gathered evidence that led to multiple arrests. It was messy, complicated. Nothing like the clean narratives in her father's recordings or the procedural efficiency of Dominic's operations. But it worked. She'd saved someone, made a difference. When she returned to D.C., Dominic was waiting with another case file, and another after that. By month 6, she was running 3 operations simultaneously, coordinating assets across different cities, building her own network of contacts who trusted her because she'd proven herself competent. She was becoming what her father had been, but different, better, maybe. At least more honest about the work. 1 year after the press conference, Charlotte stood on the roof of Dominic's building. The penthouse had access she'd never explored until now. Boston spread below her, lights scattered like stars across the darkness. The city that had been her home but felt foreign now. She'd been gone too long, changed too much. Dominic joined her, carrying 2 glasses of wine. Thought I'd find you here. Needed air. Needed space to think. About? Everything, what I've become, whether my father would approve. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then, he'd be terrified and proud in equal measure. Terrified because you're taking risks he spent 20 years avoiding. Proud because you're doing it better than he ever did. I'm still angry at him sometimes. For dying. For leaving me this mess. That's normal. He'd understand. Charlotte took a sip of wine. It was good. Dominic only bought good wine.
She'd developed taste in the past year, learned to appreciate quality in things she'd never noticed before. Food, clothes, the difference between competent operations and excellent ones. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. Training me, protecting me, giving me purpose when I'd lost everything else." "You gave yourself purpose. I just provided resources." Dominic leaned against the railing. "Your father saved my life once. I told you that. What I didn't tell you is that I'd given up. That night in Prague, bleeding out in an alley, I'd accepted I was done. Then he appeared, refused to let me quit, made me keep fighting. And now you're doing the same for me." "Something like that. Debts get paid forward in this business. Your father taught me that too." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. Charlotte thought about the girl she'd been a year ago. Naive, scared, completely unprepared for violence or complexity. That girl was gone, dead as thoroughly as her father. In her place stood someone harder, someone who could coordinate extractions and analyze intelligence and make decisions about who deserved protection and who deserved exposure. Someone who'd looked at Dmitry Volkov across a courtroom during his arraignment and felt nothing but cold satisfaction that he'd spend the rest of his life in prison. "I don't regret it," Charlotte said. "Any of it. Even the kidnapping. Even the fear. It led here, to this. To work that matters." "Good. Regret is useless in this business." Dominic finished his wine. "I've got something else for you. An offer." "Another case?" "A partnership. Formal arrangement. You'd have equity in the firm, authority over operations, full access to resources. You'd be my second in command. Help me build something that lasts beyond either of us." Charlotte turned to face him fully. "Why?" "Because you're good at this. Because you think like your father, but you're not bound by his caution. Because I trust you, and because—" He paused, something vulnerable entering his expression. "Because I'm tired of doing this alone. Building something permanent requires more than one person. Requires someone who understands the cost and chooses it anyway." "Yes," Charlotte said without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." They shook hands again, this time as equals, as partners, as people who'd chosen each other through crisis and come out the other side stronger. 6 months after that, Charlotte Hayes testified one final time, not to Congress or federal investigators, to a graduating class at Boston College, receiving an honorary degree for her work exposing intelligence corruption. The university had reversed her leave of absence, offered her degree without the thesis, recognized her as an alumna who'd done extraordinary things. She stood at the podium, looking out at students who seemed impossibly young, and thought about what she wanted to say, about her father, about choices, about the paths that found you instead of the ones you planned. "I thought I knew what my life would be," she began. "Graduate school, academic career, quiet research into questions no one cared about, except me. That life ended abruptly, violently, in ways I couldn't control. And I spent a long time being angry about that. Angry at circumstances, at my father for leaving me his legacy, at the world for being more complicated than I'd believed. But somewhere in that anger, I found purpose. I found work that mattered more than any thesis I could have written. I found people who saw me not as a victim, but as someone capable of fighting back. And I learned that sometimes the life you don't choose is better than the one you planned. I'm not saying seek out trauma. I'm not saying abandon your dreams for someone else's mission. I'm saying stay open to transformation. Stay brave when the world shows you its darkness. And understand that the person you become in crisis, that's who you really are. Everything before is just preparation." The audience applauded. Charlotte left the stage and found Dominic waiting, along with Marcus and Katerina and Rebecca Sato, and even Becca, who'd flown in from California. Her new family, assembled from crisis and choice. They went to dinner at an expensive restaurant where Charlotte didn't have to check prices, where the wine list made sense and the conversation flowed easily between people who'd earned each other's trust through shared danger. "To Robert Hayes," Dominic said, raising his glass, "who started something he couldn't finish but chose the perfect person to complete it. To Charlotte," Katerina added, "who proved that truth is worth fighting for even when the cost is everything." Charlotte raised her own glass. "To second chances, to new families, to the life I didn't plan but wouldn't trade for anything." They drank together, and Charlotte felt something she hadn't felt since before her father died. Something that might have been peace. or might have been the calm before the next storm. In this business, the two were hard to distinguish. But it didn't matter. She was ready. Whatever came next, she'd face it the way she'd faced everything else this year, with clear eyes, steady hands, and the knowledge that she'd survived worse. The girl who'd been grabbed off a Boston street was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew exactly how dangerous the world was and chose to stay in it anyway. Chose to fight. Chose to matter. And that, Charlotte thought as she looked around the table at people who'd become her anchor, was the best revenge of all. Not just surviving what had been done to her, but thriving because of it. Building something stronger than what had been destroyed. Her father had left her a legacy of secrets and shadows. She'd taken it and made it something else. Something hers. And she was just getting started,